They say an alpha without a pack is nothing, just a beast pretending to be a king. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about a woman who proved them all wrong. A woman who walked through fire, betrayal, and blood to claim what was always hers. This isn't some fairy tale where the weak get rescued. This is raw survival. This is what happens when an empire tries to bury its greatest weapon alive. Stick with me till the end because this story gets darker before it gets lighter, and I want to hear from you. Drop a like and comment your city down below. Let me know where my pack is watching from tonight. The night Selene Vaeris turned 24, her father tried to kill her in front of 300 witnesses. Not with claws, not with teeth, with something sharper than both. Shame. The great hall of Hollow Ridge stank of ambition and burning pine. Wolves from 6 territories had traveled through snow-choked mountain passes to celebrate Alpha Morkant's 40th year of rule. Chandeliers made from bone crystal threw fractured light across faces that had learned to smile while calculating your worth. Daughters in silk gowns clustered near the high table like jewels arranged for inspection. Sons tested each other with shoulder bumps and measuring stares that promised future challenges. The air hummed with barely restrained violence dressed up as civilization. Selene stood at the servants' entrance wearing a dress the color of dirty silver. It had belonged to her mother. The hem was torn. 3 buttons at the back were mismatched because the original ones had cracked years ago. She'd sewn them herself by candlelight while her hands shook from the episode she'd suffered that morning. Another violent seizure that left her choking on her own spit while her wolf clawed at the prison inside her bones. Her half-sister Rhiannon swept past in crimson velvet, deliberate and cruel. "You're standing in the help section," Rhiannon said without looking at her. "Oh wait, that's exactly where you belong, isn't it?" The words carried just far enough for the nearby wolves to hear. Laughter rippled through the crowd like a disease. Selene said nothing. She'd learned that silence was the only shield they couldn't break. Her father's voice boomed across the hall. He stood beneath the ancestral banners, a mountain of muscle and authority wrapped in ceremonial furs. His eyes were the color of storm clouds before lightning strikes. Those eyes found Selene in the crowd, and his expression curdled into something close to disgust. "Tonight we celebrate strength," Morkan announced. His voice carried the weight of mountains. "We celebrate the bloodline that has held Hollow Ridge for 7 generations. We celebrate wolves who know what it means to serve the pack with honor." He paused. The pause stretched like a blade across skin. "And we acknowledge those who fail that honor." Every head in the hall turned towards Selene. Her grandmother Isolde gripped her arm. The old woman's fingers were thin as bird bones, but strong. "Don't react," she whispered. "He wants you to break. Don't give him the satisfaction." But Morkant wasn't finished. "My youngest daughter," he said, and the way he spoke the word daughter made it sound like a curse. 24 years old, born under a full moon, blessed by blood that should have made her extraordinary. And yet, he let the silence do its work. She cannot complete her shift. She suffers episodes that leave her writhing on the ground like a rabid animal. She is weak where she should be strong, broken where she should be whole, an Omega who cannot even fulfill an Omega's purpose. Someone in the crowd whispered agreement, then another. Soon the whispers became a low rumble of consensus. Selene's hands were shaking. Her wolf stirred inside the cage that had trapped it for as long as she could remember. It clawed and snarled and begged to be released. But the bindings held. They always held. Isolde's grip tightened. "Breathe, girl." Morkant raised his goblet. "To the future of Hollow Ridge," he declared. "May it be carried by wolves worthy of the name." The hall erupted in cheers. Selene felt her chest crack open. Not physically. Somewhere deeper. In the place where hope used to live. She turned to leave and nearly collided with a serving girl carrying a tray of raw venison. The meat hit the floor. Blood spread across stone. The serving girl looked at Selene with naked panic. Before she could apologize, Rhiannon appeared like smoke. "Can't even walk without causing destruction," her half-sister said. She nudged the spilled meat with her boot. "Just like everything else you touch." Selene knelt to help clean it up. Her hands were still shaking. She reached for a piece of venison, and Rhiannon's boot came down on her wrist. Not hard enough to break bone, just hard enough to trap her there. "Stay down," Rhiannon said quietly. "It suits you." Something inside Selene screamed. Her wolf threw itself against the cage with enough force to make her gasp. For a split second, she felt claws pierce through skin. Her vision went white. Power surged up her spine like lightning finding a conductor. Then the binding slammed back into place. The power vanished. Selene collapsed forward onto her hands. Blood dripped from her nose onto the stone. The seizure lasted maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like drowning. When her vision cleared, Rhiannon was smiling. "Pathetic," her half-sister said, and walked away. Isolde hauled Selene to her feet and dragged her toward the side corridor. They moved through shadows and servant passages until they reached the kitchen garden behind the hall. Cold air hit Selene's face like a slap. She vomited into the snow. Her grandmother held her hair back and said nothing until it was finished. Then Isolde spoke in a voice carved from granite. "Your father is a coward. Your sister is a fool. And this pack is dying from the inside because they've forgotten what real strength looks like." Selene wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Her whole body ached like she'd been beaten. "I'm broken," she whispered. "He's right. You are not broken," Isolde snapped. Her eyes flashed yellow in the dark. "You are buried. There's a difference." Selene looked at her grandmother. The old woman had scars across her face from a war fought before Selene was born. She'd been a warrior once, before age and politics had forced her into the shadows. "Your mother knew what you were," Isolde continued. "She knew the bloodline you carried. She knew what they'd do if they found out. So she bound your wolf to protect you." Selene had heard this before. Family myths about ancient lineages and forgotten powers. Stories told to children to make them feel special when they weren't. "I don't want stories," Selene said. "I want to shift. I want to be normal." "Normal," Isolde repeated. She laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Normal wolves get slaughtered when real power shows up. Your mother died protecting the secret that makes you anything but normal." Before Selene could respond, bells began ringing from the watchtower. The sound cut through the night like an alarm. Wolves poured from the great hall into the courtyard. Selene heard her father shouting orders, heard the organized chaos of a pack preparing for something unexpected. Isolde grabbed her arm. "Come, now." They moved through the garden toward the outer wall. Other wolves were streaming in the opposite direction toward the main gates. No one paid attention to an old woman and a failed Omega. They reached a section of wall where vines grew thick enough to provide handholds. Isolde started climbing. For a 70-year-old woman, she moved like a soldier. Selene followed, her body still weak from the seizure. At the top of the wall, they looked down into the valley below. The entire landscape glowed with silver torchlight. An army had arrived. Not just any army. Nightspire's royal guard. Hundreds of wolves in black ceremonial armor formed perfect ranks along the frozen road. War banners bearing the obsidian crown snapped in the wind. At the center of the formation stood carriages that looked like they'd been carved from midnight itself. "He's here," Isolde breathed. She sounded shocked, truly shocked. "Who?" Selene asked. The old woman's voice dropped to something close to reverence. "The Alpha King." Vaelor Draven had killed his first wolf at age 7. His father's rival had tried to poison the royal family during a summit feast. Vaelor had been serving wine because tradition demanded the king's children learn humility through service. He'd noticed the way the visiting Alpha's hand had lingered over the goblet. Noticed the tiny leather packet that had transferred from palm to rim. Vaelor had said nothing. He'd waited until his father lifted the goblet to drink. Then he'd thrown the boiling wine into the rival Alpha's face. In the chaos that followed, while the rival Alpha screamed and clawed at his burning eyes, 7-year-old Vaelor had picked up a serving knife and driven it through the man's throat. The memory never left him, not because of the blood, not because of the screaming, because of how easy it had been, how right it had felt. Now, 19 years later, Vaelor sat in a war carriage designed for intimidation and felt nothing but exhaustion. His second-in-command, Kael, rode across from him. The man was built like a siege weapon with a face that looked like it had been carved from an axe blade. "Remind me why we're stopping at this frozen shithole," Kael said. "Political necessity," Vaelor replied without looking up from the map he'd been studying. "Hollow Ridge controls 3 mountain passes. We need their cooperation for the southern trade routes." Kael grunted. You could just take the passes. I could, Vaelor agreed, but I'm trying a new strategy. It's called not starting a civil war before winter. His second-in-command looked skeptical. When did you develop a conscience? I didn't, Vaelor said. I developed efficiency. Conquering is expensive. Cooperation is cheaper. The carriage hit a rut in the road and Vaelor's hand instinctively went to the sword at his hip. Old habits. He'd been fighting since before most wolves learned to shift. First against his father's enemies, then against his father himself, then against everyone who thought a 16-year-old boy couldn't hold an empire together. They'd all been wrong. Nightspire had grown from a kingdom into an empire under his rule. Trade flourished, roads were safe, justice was brutal but consistent. He'd turned chaos into order through the simple principle that betrayal resulted in extinction. But lately, something had changed. Victory felt hollow. Peace felt like waiting for the next war. His bed was full of wolves who wanted proximity to power, not proximity to him. He was 30 years old and felt ancient. The carriage rolled to a stop. Kael opened the door and stepped out first, scanning for threats out of pure instinct. Then he gestured for Vaelor to emerge. The Alpha King stepped into the courtyard of Hollow Ridge and the entire pack fell to its knees. Vaelor barely noticed. His attention was caught by the architecture. The fortress was older than he'd expected, built from mountain stone with defensive positions that suggested whoever had designed it understood siege warfare. Impressive for a territory this remote. Alpha Morkant approached across the courtyard. The man was huge and moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight on his own territory. He knelt, rose, offered the traditional greeting. Your Majesty, Hollow Ridge is honored by your presence. Vaelor studied him. Morkant had small eyes that calculated constantly, the kind of wolf who smiled while planning your funeral. I need a bath, Vaelor said, food, and a report on your territory's defensive capabilities. In that order. If Morkant was insulted, he hit it well. Of course, Your Majesty. We've prepared chambers in the West Tower. Tonight we feast in your honor. Vaelor waved a hand. Fine. Just keep the speeches short. He started toward this great hall and then his instincts screamed. The sensation hit him like a physical blow. His wolf surged to attention inside his chest. Every nerve in his body ignited. His vision sharpened until he could count individual snowflakes falling in the courtyard. Something was here. Something his wolf recognized before his mind could process it. He stopped walking. Kael immediately went on alert, hand dropping to his weapon. What is it? His second-in-command asked quietly. Vaelor didn't answer. He was scanning the crowd. Nobles and warriors and servants all watching him with various degrees of fear and ambition. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained the sudden violence of his wolf's reaction. Then his gaze found the wall. Two figures stood at the top, an old woman and a young one. The young one wore a dress that looked like it had survived a battle. Her hair was dark and loose around her shoulders. She was staring down at his army with an expression he couldn't quite read. Their eyes met. The world tilted. Vaelor's wolf threw itself against his control with enough force to make him take a step forward. Power flooded his system, ancient recognition, instinct older than language. Mine, his wolf snarled. Ours. Claim. Protect. Mate. No, Vaelor thought. That's not possible. But his wolf didn't care about possibility. It cared about certainty. And it was absolutely certain. Kael grabbed his arm. Are you injured? Vaelor realized he'd stopped breathing. He forced air into his lungs, forced his heartbeat to slow, forced his claws to retract before anyone noticed they'd emerged. Who is that? He asked. His voice came out rougher than intended. Kael followed his gaze. On the wall? I don't know. Want me to find out? Yes, Vaelor said. His second-in-command moved away to intercept one of Morkant's attendants. Vaelor couldn't stop staring. The young woman on the wall was still watching him. She looked like she was deciding whether to run or fight. Neither, he realized. She looked like she was deciding whether she even existed. Something about that expression cracked something open in his chest. Kael returned. His face was carefully neutral. That's Morkant's youngest daughter, Selene. They say she's defective, can't complete her shift. Vaelor felt his jaw tighten. She's watching the army like someone who knows what formations mean. Kael shrugged. Maybe she's smarter than they think. Or more dangerous, Vaelor said quietly. His wolf was still snarling, still demanding, still absolutely convinced that the woman on the wall was the answer to a question he hadn't known he'd been asking. Vaelor had spent 14 years building an empire on control, on discipline, on the absolute certainty that emotion was weakness and attachment was liability. Now every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to climb that wall and claim her. He turned away, forced himself to walk toward the great hall, forced his wolf back into submission. But he could still feel her watching him, and he knew with terrible certainty that nothing in his carefully controlled life was ever going to be the same. Come. The feast was a performance of wealth. Hollow Ridge couldn't afford. Selene watched from her position at the back of the hall as servants hauled platters of roasted elk, honeyed pheasant, and winter vegetables preserved in salt and fat. Wine flowed from barrels that must have cost her father 3 months of trade revenue. Musicians played instruments that looked older than the fortress itself, all of it designed to impress a king who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Vaelor sat at the high table with an expression of profound boredom. He'd changed into formal attire that somehow made him look more dangerous instead of civilized. Black silk embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like stars. His hair was dark and cut short in a military style. His face was all sharp angles and old scars. He looked exactly like what he was, a weapon that had learned to wear a crown. Selene couldn't stop watching him. Something about his presence pulled at her like gravity. Her wolf stirred inside its cage with an urgency that bordered on panic. It wanted out. It wanted to be seen. It wanted... She crushed the thought before it could finish forming. She was nothing, defective, a failed Omega hiding in shadows. The Alpha King had probably already forgotten she existed. Then his eyes found hers across the entire length of the hall. The impact was physical, like someone had shoved her against a wall. Her breath caught, her pulse hammered, her wolf threw itself against the bindings with enough force to make stars explode behind her eyes. Vaelor stood. The hall went silent. He descended from the high table and started walking, not toward the nobles clustered near the front, not toward the warriors showing off near the weapons display, toward the back, toward her. Wolves scrambled to get out of his way. Conversations died mid-sentence. Her father half rose from his chair with an expression of confusion sliding into panic. Vaelor crossed the hall like he was hunting. He stopped directly in front of Selene. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected, broader. His scent hit her like a drug. Pine smoke and winter storms and something underneath that made her wolf howl with recognition. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often for anything except giving orders. "Selene," she managed. Her own voice sounded foreign. "Selene Vaeris." His eyes were dark gray, almost black in the firelight. They studied her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but instead felt like being seen for the first time in her life. "Why are you standing back here?" he asked. Behind him, Morkant was moving through the crowd. Her father's face had gone from confusion to horror. "Because I'm not important," Selene said. It was the truth, the whole humiliating truth. Vaelor's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked." "Then I don't know how to answer you," she said. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite amusement. Something sharper. "Your Majesty," Morkant arrived breathless and bowing. "Please forgive my daughter. She's not well. She shouldn't be here at all. I apologize for..." Vaelor didn't look at him. His attention remained locked on Selene. "Leave," he said. Morkant froze. "I'm sorry?" "You heard me?" Vaelor said. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Everyone except her. "Out." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. "Your Majesty, surely..." "Out!" Vaelor roared. The command hit like a shockwave. Wolves fled. Nobles scrambled toward exits. Servants dropped trays. Within 60 seconds, the great hall had emptied except for Vaelor's royal guards positioned at the doors. And Selene, she stood frozen. Her heart was trying to punch through her ribs. Her wolf was going insane inside its cage. Vaelor turned back to her. "Now," he said quietly, "tell me the truth." "About what?" she whispered. about why every instinct I possess is screaming that you're the most dangerous thing in this entire territory, and yet your own pack treats you like you're broken. Selene's breath caught. Because I am broken. No, he said. His certainty was terrifying. You're not. You don't know that. Yes, Vaelor said. I do. He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the scars on his knuckles, close enough that his scent made her dizzy. I've spent 14 years learning to recognize threats, he continued. I can smell lies. I can sense power. And you, he stopped. Something in his expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. You feel like coming home to a place I've never been. The words hung in the air between them. Selene's world tilted. This wasn't possible. Kings didn't notice shadows. Power didn't recognize failure. And yet, I can't shift, she said. The confession tore out of her. I have seizures. I'm everything my father said I am. Defective, weak, wrong. You're lying, Vaelor said. I'm not about the seizures, he interrupted. About being weak. You're terrified right now and you're still standing here arguing with me. That's not weakness. That's will. He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her jaw. The contact ignited something. Power surged through Selene's body. The bindings on her wolf cracked. For one brilliant second, she felt herself start to shift, felt her bones begin to reshape, felt her true self rising. Then the binding slammed back and she collapsed. Vaelor caught her before she hit the ground. She gasped against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, calm, like this kind of thing happened to him every day. What did you just do? He asked. Nothing, she managed. That's the problem. I can't do anything. You almost shifted, he said. I felt it. No, that was just another episode, another failure. Stop, Vaelor commanded. His hand moved to the back of her neck, gentle but firm. Stop fighting yourself. Selene looked up at him, really looked, and saw something in his eyes that shattered every assumption she'd built about who and what he was. Fear. The Alpha King was afraid, not of her, for her. Someone hurt you, he said. It wasn't a question. Someone bound your wolf. My mother, Selene whispered. To protect me. From what? From people who would kill me for what I am. Vaelor's expression went cold. Lethal. What are you? Selene hesitated. Isolde's warnings echoed in her memory. Never tell. Never trust. Never reveal. But something about Vaelor's presence made lies feel impossible. Starborn, she whispered. The word landed like a grenade. Vaelor went completely still. His eyes widened fractionally. Then his expression shuddered into something unreadable. That's not possible, he said. The Starborn bloodline died out 50 years ago. Apparently not, Selene said. He studied her. She could practically see him reassembling information, calculating, strategizing, deciding whether she was valuable or dangerous or both. Then he did something she didn't expect. He knelt. Not a formal bow, not submission, but enough to bring his eyes level with hers. If what you're saying is true, he said quietly, then you're either the greatest weapon I've ever encountered or the greatest threat. Possibly both. I know, Selene said. Her voice cracked. That's why I'm buried. Vaelor's jaw tightened. Who bound you? My mother. Before she died. And your father let this happen. Let you suffer. Let you be humiliated. He doesn't know what I am, Selene said. No one does except my grandmother. Good, Vaelor said. Keep it that way. Why? Because his voice dropped to something deadly. The wolves who hunt starborn blood don't negotiate. They exterminate. Selene felt ice slide down her spine. What are you going to do? Vaelor stood. His expression was unreadable again, locked behind the mask of the king. I'm going to figure out how to break your bindings without killing you. Then I'm going to teach you how to use what you are. And then he stopped. His eyes met hers. Then you're going to choose. Choose what? She asked. Whether you want to stay hidden or burn this whole world down. The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Before Selene could respond, the doors burst open. Isolde stood in the entrance. Her grandmother looked ancient and terrifying. Behind her, Morkant and half the pack crowded the doorway. Step away from my granddaughter, Isolde commanded. Her voice carried the weight of old authority. Vaelor didn't move. He kept his eyes on Selene. That depends, he said. Does she want me to? Everyone waited. Selene's wolf was screaming. Her heart was racing. Her whole life had been shadows and silence and careful survival. Now an Alpha King was offering her fire. She met Vaelor's eyes and made a choice. No, she said. Stay. Morkant's face went purple. Your Majesty, I must insist. You must nothing, Vaelor said without looking away from Selene. Your daughter is under my protection now. That's not your decision to make, Morkant snarled. Vaelor finally turned. His expression was colder than winter. I'm the Alpha King. Every decision is mine to make. Challenge me if you disagree. The threat was naked, absolute. Morkant backed down, but his eyes promised murder. Isolde moved forward. She looked at Selene, then at Vaelor, then back at Selene. Are you sure, girl? Selene thought about 24 years of humiliation, thought about her mother's death and her father's cruelty and Rhiannon's constant torment, thought about seizures in the dirt and blood on stone. Then she thought about the way Vaelor had looked at her, like she was powerful instead of broken. Yes, Selene said. I'm sure. Her grandmother's expression softened. Then may the moon guide you both. She turned and left. The pack filtered out behind her. Morkant was the last to go. He looked at Selene with naked hatred. This isn't over, he said. The doors closed. Selene was alone with the Alpha King. Vaelor moved to the high table and poured wine. He drank. Then he poured a second glass and brought it to her. You just declared war on your own father, he said. Selene took the wine. Her hand was shaking. I know. Do you understand what that means? It means I can't go back, she said. It means I either survive going forward or die trying. Vaelor studied her. Good answer. He moved to the window, looked out at the night. I killed my father, he said. The confession came out flat. Matter of fact, I was 16. He was going to murder everyone who opposed his war against the Eastern Territories. I stopped him. Did you regret it? Selene asked. Every day, Vaelor said. Not because he didn't deserve it, because killing the monster didn't make me less of one. He turned back to face her. You think I'm offering you salvation? I'm not. I'm offering you survival. Those aren't the same thing. Selene set down her wine glass. I don't want salvation. I want to stop being prey. Then we understand each other, Vaelor said. He crossed the hall and stopped inches away from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This bond between us, he said quietly. Do you feel it? Yes, she whispered. It's going to complicate everything. I know. It might destroy us both. I know, she repeated. Vaelor's hand came up to cup her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, completely at odds with everything else about him. Then let's burn together, he said. He kissed her. The world exploded. Power detonated through Selene's body. The bindings on her wolf didn't just crack. They shattered. Magic poured through her veins like liquid starlight. Her bones began to shift. Her senses expanded. She felt the moon above them even through stone and shadow. She felt her wolf rise. For the first time in 24 years, Selene Vaeris transformed. Her wolf was massive. Crystalline white fur that glowed like captured moonlight. Eyes that burned silver. She was larger than any Omega had a right to be, larger than most Alphas. She was magnificent. Vaelor shifted beside her. His wolf was pure midnight, huge and scarred and radiating dominance. But he didn't challenge her. He bowed his head. Recognition. Acceptance. Mate. For one perfect moment, everything was right. Then the window exploded inward. Wolves poured into the hall. Not from Hollow Ridge. These wore armor marked with symbols Selene didn't recognize. Their eyes glowed red with something that wasn't natural. Vaelor's guards burst through the doors. The hall erupted into chaos. Selene's wolf moved on instinct. She threw herself between Vaelor and an attacker. Moonfire erupted from her fur. The enemy wolf disintegrated on contact. More poured in. Vaelor fought like living death beside her. His jaws closed on throats. His claws opened arteries. But there were too many. Someone shouted orders from outside. A voice that carried unnatural authority. Seize the Starborn, kill the king. Selene felt ice flood her veins. They knew. Somehow, impossibly, they already knew what she was. Vaelor's wolf positioned himself in front of her, protective, claiming, mine. But even he couldn't stop them all. A massive gray wolf tackled Selene from the side. She rolled, clawed, bit. Her power surged, but she didn't know how to control it. Moonfire exploded wild and dangerous. The gray wolf pinned her, raised claws to strike. Then Vaelor was there. He ripped the attacker off her with enough force to break bones, stood over her, dared anything to try again. The attackers paused. A new wolf entered through the shattered window. This one was different, larger. His fur was the color of dried blood, and his eyes burned with intelligence that felt wrong. Ancient, stolen. He shifted to human form. The man who emerged looked like a noble, handsome features, cold smile. He wore ceremonial armor marked with symbols that made Selene's wolf recoil. Lord Sarikar Vayne inclined his head in mock courtesy. Your Majesty, what a pleasant surprise. I was only expecting the girl. Vaelor shifted to human, stood naked and unconcerned. His body was covered in scars and fresh wounds. You're dead, Vaelor said. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of fact. Sarikar laughed. Eventually. But not tonight. Tonight I claim what should have been mine 50 years ago. He gestured. His wolves surrounded them completely. The Starborn bloodline belongs to those who know how to use it, not to terrified children or kings who play at peace. Selene shifted back to human. She stood beside Vaelor. Her whole body was shaking with rage and power she couldn't control. You can't have me, she said. Sarikar's smile widened. My dear, I already do. He raised his hand. Selene felt something wrap around her throat. Invisible. Choking. Magic that tasted like corruption. She fell to her knees. Vaelor lunged. Sarikar's wolves intercepted him. It took 6 of them to bring him down. The last thing Selene saw before darkness took her was Vaelor fighting, still fighting, even when he couldn't win. Then a bag went over her head, and the world disappeared. Well, when she woke, she was in a cage. Not metaphorical. Actual iron bars in a stone cell that smelled like old blood and older cruelty. Selene's head pounded. Her body ached. The power that had flooded through her was gone. Sealed again. But this time she could feel the bindings, and they weren't her mother's protection. They were Sarikar's chains. She sat up slowly. The cell was small. No windows. One door. Iron bars that hummed with magic designed to suppress shifting. Footsteps approached. Sarikar appeared outside her cage. He looked pleased, relaxed, like he'd just won a game he'd been playing for years. The Starborn bloodline, he said conversationally. Do you know how long I've been hunting it? Selene said nothing. 50 years, Sarikar continued, since the purge that should have eliminated every last one of you. But your mother was clever. She hid. Bred with a nobody alpha in a nowhere territory. Bound your power so thoroughly, even I couldn't sense it. He crouched outside the bars, until you decided to fall in love with the most recognizable wolf in the Empire. That was careless. Where's Vaelor? Selene demanded. Sarikar smiled. The king? Probably dead by now. I left him to my wolves. They had orders to make it painful. You're lying, Selene said, but uncertainty twisted in her gut. Sarikar stood. Doesn't matter either way. What matters is that you're going to teach me how to wield Starborn power, and then I'm going to use it to tear down everything the precious Alpha King built. He turned to leave. Never, Selene said. Sarikar paused, looked back. His expression was patient. My dear, he said, you will. Everyone breaks eventually. The only question is how much you suffer first. He walked away. His footsteps echoed down the corridor. Selene was alone in the dark. Her wolf was caged. Her power was sealed. The one person who had seen her as something other than broken was probably dead. She'd spent 24 years learning to survive humiliation. Now she had to learn something harder. How to survive hope. Because somewhere in the darkness, she could still feel it. A bond that refused to break. A connection that whispered one impossible truth. Vaelor Draven was still alive. And if he was alive, then this wasn't over. Not even close. The bond didn't lie. That was the first thing Selene learned in the darkness. She could feel Vaelor across distance and stone and whatever magic Sarikar had used to cage her. It pulsed like a second heartbeat. Steady, furious, alive. He was hunting. She didn't know how she knew. The bond didn't speak in words, it spoke in sensations. Rage that tasted like smoke. Determination that felt like iron. And underneath it all, something that made her chest ache. Fear. Not for himself. For her. The Alpha King, who had conquered 6 territories and killed his own father, was afraid of losing someone. The realization made Selene want to laugh and cry at the same time. She did neither. Instead, she sat in the dark and took inventory. Her wrists were raw from iron manacles. Her dress was torn. She could taste blood where she'd bitten her tongue during the capture. The cell was maybe 8 feet by 10. No windows. One door reinforced with bars that hummed with suppression magic. The air smelled like mildew and old violence. This was not the first time someone had been caged here. Selene pressed her palm against the cold stone floor and reached for her wolf. The bindings Sarikar had placed were different from her mother's protection. These were chains meant to strangle instead of preserve. They wrapped around her power like barbed wire. She pulled anyway. Pain exploded through her nervous system. Her vision went white. For a second, she felt her bones start to shift before the chains yanked her back. She gasped. Sweat dripped down her spine. Again, her wolf snarled. Try again. No, Selene thought, not yet. I need to understand what he did first. But her wolf didn't understand patience. It understood cages and instinct and the desperate need to break free, just like Vaelor's wolf probably did. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Selene forced herself upright, forced her expression into something neutral. Her grandmother had taught her this. How to hide fear behind stillness. How to make silence a weapon. A figure appeared beyond the bars. Not Sarikar. A woman. Maybe 40 years old with iron-gray hair pulled back severe enough to make her face look skeletal. She wore robes marked with the same corrupted symbols that had been on Sarikar's armor. Her eyes were pale blue and completely empty of warmth. She studied Selene like a scientist examining a specimen. You're prettier than I expected, the woman said. Her voice was educated. Clinical. The Starborn. I dissected 20 years ago was half feral by the time we captured her. You seem almost civilized. Selene's stomach turned. Dissected. The woman smiled. Don't look so horrified. We learned so much from her. How the bloodline channels lunar energy. How it bonds with the moon's phases. How it screams when you pull it apart. Who are you? Selene asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Dr. Marin Thale. I'm Lord Sarikar's chief researcher. She pulled out a small leather journal and began making notes. He wants me to map your power structure before we begin extraction. Extraction, Selene repeated. Of your abilities, Dr. Thale said cheerfully. We've developed a process. It's quite elegant, really. We siphon the starborn essence into vessels that can channel it without the messy limitations of a living host. She looked up from her journal. You'll die, of course. But your power will serve a greater purpose. Selene felt ice slide through her veins. How long? How long what? How long do I have? Dr. Thale consulted her notes. Lord Sarikar wants 3 days of observation first to ensure we capture the full range of your capabilities. Then we'll begin the extraction process. That takes approximately 6 hours, sometimes 8 if the subject resists. She said it like discussing a recipe. Selene's wolf threw itself against the chains. Rage flooded her system. Her hands started to shake. Dr. Thale noticed. Oh, good. You're already responding to stress. That will give us excellent baseline data. She made another notation. I'd recommend you rest, she continued. The extraction is quite painful. You'll want your strength. She turned to leave. Wait, Selene said. The doctor paused. The Alpha King. Is he really dead? Dr. Thale's expression didn't change. Lord Sarikar left him with 20 of our best hunters. No one has reported back yet. Make of that what you will. She walked away. Her footsteps faded. Selene was alone again. 3 days. She had 3 days to figure out how to break chains designed by someone who had dissected starborn wolves alive. 3 days to escape a fortress she'd never seen. 3 days to somehow survive long enough for Vaelor to find her, if he was even still alive. The bond pulsed, steady, angry, alive. He was alive, and he was coming. Selene just had to survive until he got here. Vaelor had forgotten what it felt like to be hunted. He'd spent 14 years as the apex predator, the thing other wolves feared. Now he crouched in frozen underbrush while enemy scouts passed 20 feet away and remembered what prey felt like. It felt clarifying. 6 of Sarkar's hunters were dead. Vaelor had killed them in the first 30 seconds of the ambush back at Hollow Ridge, fast and brutal before they understood what was happening. The remaining 14 had been more careful. They'd separated, used tactics, forced him to choose between pursuit and survival. He'd chosen survival. Because staying alive meant finding Selene. Everything else was negotiable. Kael appeared beside him, like smoke. His second-in-command was bleeding from a gash across his ribs, but moving like it didn't exist. He carried 3 enemy weapons and a map he'd taken from a body. "They're regrouping at the eastern pass," Kael whispered, "setting up a perimeter. They think we're still in the valley." "Good," Vaelor said. "Let them think that." He studied the map. It was hand-drawn but detailed. Someone had marked patrol routes and defensive positions, and in the northeast corner a single notation, primary holding facility. "That's where she is," Vaelor said. Kael looked at the map. "That's a fortress. We're 2 wolves. Even with your royal guards, we'd need—" "I don't care what we'd need," Vaelor interrupted. His voice came out rougher than intended. "We're going in." His second-in-command was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Vaelor had never heard from him before. "You love her." It wasn't a question. Vaelor didn't answer immediately. He was watching the tree line, calculating distances, planning routes, doing everything except acknowledging what Kael had just said, because acknowledging it made it real. And real things could be used against you. "I felt the bond snap into place," Vaelor finally said. "The second I saw her, every instinct I have says she's mine." "That's not love," Kael said. "That's biology." Vaelor looked at him. His second-in-command had been with him since the beginning, had helped him kill his father, had stood beside him through civil war and political nightmare, had never once questioned an order. Until now. "You're right," Vaelor said. "It's biology. It's also the first time in 14 years I've felt anything except the weight of the crown." He stood, began moving through the forest toward the northeast. Kael followed. After a moment he said quietly, "You know this is probably a trap." "Definitely a trap," Vaelor agreed. "And you're going anyway." "Yes." They moved in silence for several minutes. Then Kael asked the question that mattered. "What happens if she's already dead?" Vaelor felt the bond pulse in his chest. Steady, alive. "Hers." "She's not," he said. "How do you know?" "Because I'd feel it if she was. The bond doesn't lie, unless it's feeding you false hope." Vaelor stopped, turned. His eyes met Kael's. "Then I'll die trying. Either way, I'm done pretending I don't care." His second-in-command studied him, then nodded slowly. "All right, we'll die trying together, just like old times." They kept moving. An hour later, they reached the fortress perimeter. It was worse than the map suggested. Built into a cliff face with only 2 approaches, both heavily guarded, walls reinforced with magic that made Vaelor's skin crawl. This wasn't just a prison, it was a research facility designed to hold things that shouldn't be held. Kael whistled low. "They've been planning this for years." "Longer," Vaelor said. "This kind of infrastructure takes decades. Sarkar didn't just decide to hunt Starborn yesterday. This has been his obsession." "Why?" "Because power is addictive," Vaelor said. "And some wolves will burn the world down for one more taste." He would know. They circled the perimeter, counted guards, mapped patrol patterns, looked for weaknesses. There weren't many. The main gate was a killing field. The cliff approach was suicide. The only viable entry point was a service tunnel on the east side. It was guarded, but not as heavily as the others. "That's our way in," Vaelor said. Kael looked skeptical. "They'll see us coming. Not if we give them something else to look at first." Vaelor moved back into the tree line, found what he was looking for. A patrol camp maybe half a mile from the fortress. 6 guards. Supply crates. Weapons cache. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We're going to make some noise, he said. Bats. The explosion happened at midnight. Selene heard it from her cell, felt the fortress shake, heard shouts and running footsteps as guards mobilized. She was on her feet immediately. More explosions followed, closer. Then the sound of fighting, metal on metal, screaming, the particular snarl of wolves dying violently. Someone was attacking the fortress. Selene reached for the bond, felt Vaelor's presence blazing like a star. He was close, maybe inside already. Hope surged through her chest. Then Dr. Thale appeared outside her cell with 4 armed guards. Change of plans, the doctor said. Her clinical calm had fractured into something closer to panic. We're moving you to the secondary facility. No, Selene said. Dr. Thale gestured. 2 guards entered the cell. They grabbed Selene's arms. She fought, but the chains sapped her strength. They hauled her upright. The fortress is under attack, Dr. Thale continued. Lord Sarikar wants you secured before... The wall exploded inward. Stone and dust filled the corridor. Guards scattered. Someone was screaming. Then Vaelor stepped through the hole where the wall used to be. He looked like war itself, covered in blood that wasn't his, eyes burning yellow. His wolf so close to the surface it distorted his human form. He radiated violence so pure it made the air hard to breathe. His gaze found Selene. Everything stopped. Dr. Thale drew a weapon, some kind of modified crossbow with bolts that glowed with suppression magic. She aimed at Vaelor. He moved, too fast to track. 1 second he was across the corridor. The next he had the doctor's throat in his hand. The crossbow clattered to the floor. Where are the keys? He asked. His voice was barely human. Dr. Thale choked, clawed at his grip. Couldn't speak. Vaelor threw her against the wall, hard enough to crack stone. She slid down, didn't move again. The remaining guards rushed him. Mistake. Vaelor tore through them like they were made of paper. Claws opened throats, jaws closed on spines. It was brutal and efficient and over in seconds. Then he was at Selene's cell. He gripped the bars, pulled. The metal groaned. The suppression magic sparked and fought, but couldn't hold against whatever force Vaelor channeled. The bars bent, broke. He stepped inside. Are you hurt? He asked. His voice had dropped back to something almost human, but his hands were shaking as they reached for her face. I'm okay, Selene said. You're not, Vaelor said. He was looking at the manacles, at the raw skin beneath, at the chains wrapped around her power. His expression went dark. Murderous. I'm going to kill him, he said. Not a threat, a promise. I'm going to kill everyone who touched you. Selene grabbed his wrist. His skin was hot, feverish. The bond between them pulsed so hard it felt like a physical thing. Get me out of these chains first, she said. Vaelor studied the manacles, the magic woven through them. He pulled a knife from his belt. It looked old, ceremonial. The blade was etched with symbols that hurt to look at. This is going to hurt, he warned. Everything hurts, Selene said. Do it. He positioned the blade against the first manacle, spoke words in a language she didn't recognize. The knife began to glow. Then he cut. The manacle shattered. Power flooded back into Selene's arm. Not completely. The chains Sarikar had placed on her wolf were still there, but some of the pressure released. Vaelor moved to the second manacle. Cut again. It shattered. Selene gasped. Her wolf surged, still caged but closer to the surface. She could feel lunar energy responding to her call, could feel her true self stirring. Can you walk? Vaelor asked. Yes, Selene said. Can you fight? She met his eyes. Try me. Something fierce flashed in his expression. Pride, possession, mine. He grabbed her hand. They moved. The fortress was chaos. Fires burned in 3 sections. Guards rushed past without noticing them in the smoke and confusion. Kael appeared from a side corridor with blood on his face and a manic grin. Found her, Kael observed. Obviously, Vaelor said. We need to move, his second-in-command continued. Sarikar's pulling back his forces. They're setting up a trap at the main gate. Then we don't go out the main gate, Vaelor said. He led them deeper into the fortress instead of out. Selene wanted to question the logic, but trusted he had a plan. They reached a central chamber. It was huge, circular. The walls were covered in symbols that made Selene's wolf recoil. In the center stood a complex array of crystalline structures hooked to machinery that looked like it belonged in a nightmare. "What is this?" Kael asked. "This is where they extract starborn power," Selene said. Her voice came out hollow. "Dr. Thale told me." Vaelor's expression went cold. "Then we're destroying it." He moved to the central mechanism, studied it, then began pulling specific crystals from their housings. "What are you doing?" Selene asked. "Creating a distraction," Vaelor said. "These crystals store magical energy. If we overload them, the whole place goes up," Kael finished. "That's insane." "That's the point," Vaelor said. He worked fast, rerouting connections, reversing flows. Selene could feel power building in the room, pressure mounting. "We have maybe 2 minutes," Vaelor said. He grabbed Selene's hand. "Let's move." They ran, back through corridors, past burning rooms, through sections where guards were too busy fighting fires to notice 3 wolves fleeing. They reached an exterior wall on the north side. "Here," Vaelor said. Kael looked at the solid stone. "This is a wall." "It's also the oldest section of the fortress," Vaelor said. He drew his knife again. Spoke more words in that ancient language. The stone began to crack. "How do you know that spell?" Selene asked. "I killed the last person who tried to use it on me," Vaelor said. "Then I learned it." The cracks widened, chunks of stone fell away. An opening appeared. "Go," Vaelor ordered. Kael went through first, then Selene, but Vaelor followed. They emerged on a cliff ledge maybe 30 feet below the fortress wall. Below them stretched forest. Behind them the fortress began to shake. "Run," Vaelor said. They shifted. Vaelor's wolf was midnight and scars. Kael's was gray and efficient. Selene felt her own transformation fight against the remaining chains. It was agony. Her bones ground, her muscles tore. But her wolf forced through anyway. She emerged crystalline and blazing with moonfire. Then they were running. Through forest, down slopes, over frozen streams. Behind them the fortress exploded. The detonation lit up the night sky. Fire and stone and shattered magic. The blast wave knocked trees flat, sent debris raining down like deadly hail. They kept running. An hour later they stopped beside a frozen river. Selene collapsed. Her wolf retreated back inside. She shifted to human and immediately started shaking. Exhaustion, shock. The chains on her power pulling tight again now that adrenaline was fading. Vaelor shifted beside her, pulled her against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat. Steady, despite everything. "You came," she said. Her voice cracked. "Of course I came," Vaelor said, like there was any other option. "You could have let me go, moved on. I'm just, You're everything," he interrupted. His arms tightened around her. "You're my mate, my equal, mine. There's no version of any reality where I let you go." Selene felt tears burning her eyes. She'd spent so long believing she was worthless, that she was the mistake her father said she was, and now an Alpha King was holding her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. "I don't know how to be what you need," she whispered. "Then we'll figure it out together," Vaelor said. Kael appeared from downstream. He'd been scouting. His expression was grim. "We have a problem," he said. "Just one?" Vaelor asked. "Multiple problems," Kael amended. "Sarikar survived. He's mobilizing his entire army, and he sent word to every territory in the Empire that you've gone rogue, that you abducted a Starborn and plan to use her power to conquer everyone." Vaelor's jaw tightened. Political warfare. "The best kind," Kael said. "You're not just fighting him, you're fighting public opinion." "How long do we have?" Vaelor asked. "Maybe a week before his forces reach Nightspire. Less if he convinces other Alphas to join him." Selene felt Vaelor's grip on her loosen. He stood, began pacing. She could see him thinking, calculating, planning 3 moves ahead. "We go back to Hollow Ridge first," Vaelor said. Kael looked shocked. "That's suicide. Morkant will turn you over the second." "Morkant is the least of my concerns," Vaelor interrupted. "Selene's grandmother is there. Isolde. She knows about Starborn bloodlines. We need that knowledge." "And then what?" Selene asked. "Then we go to war," Vaelor said. He looked at her. His eyes were burning. Not with anger. with certainty. Sarkar wants to frame me as a tyrant? Fine. I'll show him what tyranny actually looks like. That's not the answer, Selene said. Vaelor stopped pacing. What? Violence isn't the answer, she repeated. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. If you respond with pure force, you prove his propaganda true. You become the monster he's claiming you are. Then what do you suggest? Vaelor asked. His tone had an edge. Not quite anger, but close. Selene stood. Her legs shook but held. We expose him, she said. We show everyone what he really is, what he's been doing in that fortress, the experiments, the murders. We turn his own weapons against him. That takes time we don't have, Kael said. Then we make time, Selene said. She looked at Vaelor. You built an empire through strength. Now build it through truth. Vaelor studied her. She could see the war happening behind his eyes. Instinct versus strategy. Dominance versus diplomacy. Finally, he spoke. You're asking me to trust that justice will win over power. I'm asking you to trust that they're not opposites, Selene said. Real power comes from being right, not just strong. The words hung in cold air. Vaelor's expression softened, just slightly, enough that she could see the man beneath the king. All right, he said, we do it your way, but if truth doesn't work, then we burn it all down, Selene finished. Together. He smiled. It was sharp and dangerous and entirely genuine. Together, he agreed. They reached Hollow Ridge 3 days later. The journey was brutal. They avoided roads, stayed in animal form when possible, hunted for food, slept in shifts. Kael scouted ahead constantly. Selene learned things about Vaelor she wouldn't have otherwise. How he checked her wounds every time they stopped. How he positioned himself between her and danger without seeming to think about it. How he watched her sleep like he was memorizing her breathing pattern. The bond between them deepened. Not through grand gestures, through survival. On the second night, while Kael was scouting and they sat beside a fire built in a cave, Selene asked the question that had been burning in her mind. Why did you kill your father? Vaelor was quiet for a long time. The firelight made shadows dance across his scars. Because he was going to destroy everything I loved, he finally said. The kingdom. The people. My mother. He'd become so obsessed with expansion, he couldn't see he was tearing the empire apart from the inside. So you stopped him, Selene said. I murdered him, Vaelor corrected, in his sleep with his own ceremonial blade. Then I told the council he'd attacked me and I'd defended myself. Was that true? No, Vaelor said. His voice was flat. I'm a kinslayer and a liar. The empire is built on both. Selene moved closer, took his hand. His fingers were rough, scarred. They closed around hers carefully, like he was afraid of breaking her. You saved your people, she said. I became what I hated, Vaelor said. A king who rules through fear. Fear and respect aren't the same thing, Selene said. People follow you because you're effective, not because they're terrified. Some are terrified, Vaelor said. Some should be, Selene agreed, but not all. Not the ones you've protected, the ones who have justice because you enforced it. Vaelor looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing something he'd never expected to find. How are you not afraid of me? He asked quietly. Because I see what you are underneath, Selene said. A wolf who would rather die than fail the people he leads. That's not a monster. That's a king. His hand tightened on hers. You make me want to be better, he said. Sounded like a confession. Then be better, Selene said. But don't stop being strong. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside the cave, snow began to fall. Tell me about your mother, Vaelor said eventually. Selene felt old grief stir. She was gentle, she said, in a world that punished gentleness. She used to sing these old songs, lullabies from before the territories were divided. She said music was the only magic that couldn't be corrupted. How did she die? Hunting accident, Selene said. That's what they told everyone. But Isolde said it wasn't an accident. Someone found out what she was. What I was. They killed her for it, Vaelor said. Not a question. Yes, Selene whispered. Vaelor pulled her closer. She let herself lean against him, let herself take comfort in his strength. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be sorry," Selene said. "Help me make sure it meant something." "I will," Vaelor promised. And somehow, sitting in a cave with blood still under her nails and chains still wrapped around her power, Selene believed him. Hollow Ridge's gates were closed when they arrived. Vaelor stood at the tree line studying the fortress. Guards patrolled the walls. More than usual, the entire territory was on alert. "They know we're coming," Kael said. "Good," Vaelor said. "Let them be prepared. We're not sneaking in." He shifted to human, walked out of the forest toward the main gate. Selene and Kael shifted and followed. They were completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and Vaelor walked like he owned the ground beneath his feet. The gates opened. Not in welcome, in response to inevitable force. Alpha Morkant stood in the courtyard with 50 wolves at his back. His expression was thunderous. "You dare return here," he snarled. "I dare a lot of things," Vaelor said. His voice carried across the courtyard. "I'm the Alpha King. Daring is my profession." "You abducted my daughter," Morkant said. "I rescued your daughter," Vaelor corrected. "From the wolves you were too incompetent to notice had infiltrated your territory." "Lies," Morkant spat. "Truth," Vaelor said. He gestured at Selene. "Ask her yourself." All eyes turned to Selene. She felt the weight of their attention, the judgment, the dismissal. For 24 years she'd been invisible in this courtyard. Now she was the center of it. She stepped forward. "Lord Sarikar Vayne kidnapped me," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "He's been hunting starborn bloodlines for decades, experimenting on them, killing them. He has an army and he's marching on Nightspire." The courtyard erupted in whispers. "The girl is delusional," Morkant said. "She's always been—" "I'm standing right here," Selene interrupted. Her power stirred despite the chains. Moonfire flickered in her eyes. "And I'm done being dismissed." The whispers cut off. Morkant's face went red. "You forget yourself." "No," Selene said. "I remember myself. Finally. I am starborn. I am powerful. And I am done pretending to be broken to make you comfortable." She let her wolf show. Just enough. Crystalline fur rippled across her arms. Her eyes blazed silver. The crowd took a collective step back. "Impossible," Morkant breathed. "Very possible," said a new voice. Isolde pushed through the crowd. The old woman looked ancient and fierce. She moved to stand beside Selene. "Her mother bound her to protect her from wolves like Sarikar," Isolde said. "I helped place those bindings. I watched her suffer for years to keep her safe. And you?" She turned on Morkant with pure contempt. "You used her pain to make yourself feel powerful. You called her defective when she was extraordinary. You are a disgrace to this bloodline." Morkant's hand dropped to his weapon. "Mind your tongue, old woman." "Or what?" Isolde challenged. "You'll strike me down, in front of witnesses?" "Do it. Prove you're exactly what she says you are." The Alpha's hand stayed on his weapon, but he didn't draw. Vaelor stepped forward. His presence filled the courtyard. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. His voice carried absolute authority. "Selene's grandmother is going to teach her to control her abilities. You're going to provide resources and cooperation. And when Sarikar arrives," he smiled. It was terrifying. "We're going to show him what happens when you threaten my mate." The word mate rippled through the crowd. Morkant looked like he'd been struck. "You bonded with her?" "She's mine," Vaelor said simply. "Challenge that if you want to die today." No one moved. "Smart," Vaelor said. "Now, do we have an understanding?" Morkant's jaw worked. His pride was at war with his survival instinct. Survival won. "Yes," he ground out. "Your Majesty." "Good," Vaelor said. He turned to Isolde. "We need to break the chain Sarikar placed on her. Can you do it?" The old woman studied Selene, reached out and touched her wrist where the manacles had been. Her expression darkened. "This is corruption magic," Isolde said. "Not simple bindings. He's trying to siphon her power slowly. If we don't remove it soon, it'll kill her," Vaelor finished. His voice was flat. "Yes," Isolde said. "Then we remove it now," Vaelor said. "It will be agonizing," Isolde warned, "and dangerous. If she can't control the power when it's released, she'll burn through half the territory." Kael said. He'd been silent until now. That's what you're saying. Possibly, Isolde admitted. Selene stepped forward. Do it anyway. Everyone looked at her. I've spent 24 years in chains, she said, one kind or another. I'm done. Whatever happens when they break, I'll handle it. You could die, Isolde said gently. Then I die free, Selene said. Vaelor's expression was unreadable. Then he nodded once. We do it in the training grounds, he said. Away from the main buildings. Clear the area. No one gets close except those of us who can survive the blast. Morkant started to protest. Vaelor silenced him with a look. Make it happen, the Alpha King ordered. Now. They gathered in the training grounds as night fell. The moon was nearly full. Selene could feel its pull. Her wolf stirred restlessly. The chains around her power felt tighter. Sarakar's corruption spreading. Isolde had drawn symbols in the dirt, ancient markings that predated written language. Kael stood at the perimeter with Vaelor's royal guards, ready to contain any explosion. Vaelor stood beside Selene. His hand found hers. If this goes wrong, he said quietly. It won't, Selene said. If it does, Vaelor continued, I need you to know. I know, Selene interrupted. She squeezed his hand. I feel it too, through the bond. You don't have to say it. I want to, Vaelor said. He turned to face her fully. I love you. Not because of fate or biology or bonds, because you're brave and brilliant and you make me want to be more than just a conqueror. Selene felt tears burn. I love you too, she whispered. They kissed. Power crackled between them. The bond flared. For a moment, Selene felt the chains weaken. Then Isolde spoke. It's time. Selene stepped into the center of the symbols. Isolde began chanting. The old language. The words that spoke to moon and magic and blood. Power built in the air. Selene's wolf surged. The chains tightened in response. Pain exploded through her nervous system. She screamed. Vaelor moved to help her. Don't, Isolde snapped. If you break the circle, she dies. He froze. His face was agony. Selene felt the chains wrapping tighter, crushing. Sarakar's corruption trying to devour her from inside. Her vision went white. Her bones started breaking. Her power was tearing her apart. She was dying. Then something else awakened. Not her wolf. Something deeper. Something written into her bloodline before wolves learned to shift. The Starborn legacy. Pure lunar force. It exploded outward. Moonfire consumed the training grounds. Light so bright it turned night to day. Power so raw it shattered the chains like they were made of paper. Selene's wolf emerged. But this time it was different. She was twice the size she'd been before. Her fur blazed with silver fire. Her eyes burned like captured stars. She was magnificent and terrifying and completely unleashed. The power kept building. It wanted to destroy, to burn, to punish everything that had ever tried to cage it. Selene felt control slipping. Then Vaelor shifted. His midnight wolf appeared beside her. He didn't try to dominate her, didn't try to control the explosion. He anchored her. His presence through the bond became a lifeline, a reminder of who she was beneath the rage. She latched onto it, used it to pull herself back from the edge. Slowly the power began to settle. The moonfire dimmed, the pressure released. Selene's wolf shrank back to merely massive instead of apocalyptic. She shifted to human, collapsed. Vaelor caught her, held her. She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. You did it, he said. His voice was rough with relief. You broke the chains. Selene looked up at him, then at her hands. Power crackled beneath her skin. Controllable. Hers. I'm free, she whispered. Yes, Vaelor said. You are. Around them the training ground was scorched. Symbols burned into dirt. The air still shimmered with residual magic. But she was alive. And she was finally, truly, herself. Isolde approached. The old woman was smiling. Welcome to your birthright, she said. Selene stood on shaking legs, felt her power respond to her will for the first time, felt her wolf waiting patiently instead of clawing desperately. How do I learn to control this? She asked. The same way you survived everything else, Isolde said, through pain and practice and refusing to quit. Then let's start, Selene said. Kael appeared at the perimeter. His expression was grim. We have a problem, he said. Again. What now? Vaelor asked. Scouts just reported in. Sarakar's army isn't heading for Nightspire anymore. They changed direction. Where are they going? Selene asked. Kael looked at her, then at Vaelor. Here, he said. They're coming here. Silence fell. Then Vaelor laughed. It was dark and sharp and completely genuine. Of course they are, he said. Why would anything be simple? He turned to Selene. Think you can fight an army with your new powers? Selene felt her wolf stir, felt moonfire kindle beneath her skin, felt something else rising. Not just power, purpose. Ask me again after I win, she said. Vaelor's smile was fierce. That's my queen. The words hung in the air. Queen, not his mate, not his possession, his equal. Around them wolves began gathering, Hollow Ridge preparing for siege, Vaelor's forces mobilizing, the territory transforming into a battlefield. And Selene stood at the center of it all, finally free, finally powerful, finally ready to fight for everything she'd ever been denied. Sarakar was coming. Let him come. She was done running. The army arrived at dawn. Selene watched from the eastern tower as the horizon turned black with wolves. Not hundreds, thousands. Sarakar had called in every debt, every alliance, every fragment of loyalty he'd accumulated over decades. The banners that moved through morning mist represented 12 territories. Some she recognized. Others were foreign. All of them marching under the symbol of the Dominion Circle, a blood-red eclipse over crossed swords. Beside her, Vaelor stood silent. His jaw was tight. His eyes tracked movements in the enemy formation with the focus of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading battlefields. He's brought everyone, Kael said from behind them. His voice was flat. Every wolf who ever resented your rule, every alpha who thought they deserved the crown, every soldier who believed Sarakar's propaganda. How many? Vaelor asked. Kael was quiet for a moment. 5,000. Maybe more. Hollow Ridge had 800 defenders. Even with Vaelor's royal guard, they were outnumbered 6-1. The math was brutal. We can't win this, Kael said. Not conventionally. Vaelor's expression didn't change. Then we fight unconventionally. He turned to Selene. Show me what you can do. She'd spent the past 3 days training with Isolde, learning to channel lunar force without destroying everything around her, learning to weave moonfire into shields and weapons and pure concentrated fury. Her grandmother was a harsh teacher. Every mistake resulted in pain. Every success pushed her harder. But Selene had learned fast, because she had to. She raised her hand. Moonfire gathered in her palm. White silver flames that didn't burn. They condensed into a sphere of pure energy. She could feel the power waiting, eager, ready to be unleashed. I can hold a barrier for maybe an hour, she said. Protect a section of wall. After that, I'll need to rest. An hour isn't enough, Kael said. It's what I have, Selene said. Vaelor studied the enemy formation. They'll probe our defenses first, test for weaknesses. Sarakar's too smart to throw everything at us immediately. He'll want us exhausted before the real assault. So we make him think we're weaker than we are, Selene said. Draw him in close. Then I hit him with everything. That's suicide, Kael said. If you miss, I won't miss, Selene said. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. 3 days ago, she'd been caged and powerless. Now she was planning to face an army. People changed fast when survival demanded it. Vaelor's hand found hers. Squeezed once. If this goes wrong, he started. It won't, Selene interrupted. We already had this conversation. Trust me. His eyes met hers. I do. Then let's show Sarakar what a mistake looks like. The first attack came an hour later. Not the full army. A vanguard of maybe 200 wolves. They charged the eastern wall where defenses looked weakest. Hollow Ridge's archers fired. Wolves fell. But more kept coming. They hit the wall like a wave. Selene stood at the center of the defensive line. Her power gathered beneath her skin. She could feel every wolf approaching, could sense their heartbeats, their fear, their rage. Wait, Vaelor said beside her. Not yet. The enemy reached this wall, started climbing. Claws found purchase in stone. Wolves poured over the top. Defenders met them with steel and teeth. The wall became chaos. Blood sprayed across stone. Wolves fought in tight quarters where strategy mattered less than savagery. Selene saw a young defender go down under 3 attackers, saw Kael tear through enemies like a storm, saw her father fighting with the brutal efficiency of someone who'd never lost on home ground. Now, Vaelor said. Selene released her power. Moonfire exploded outward in a wave. It washed over the wall. Enemy wolves caught in the blast simply ceased. Not burned, erased. Their bodies disintegrated into ash that scattered on the wind. The attack broke. Survivors fled back down the wall, ran for their lines, left behind maybe 70 corpses and the smoking remains of another 60 who'd been too close to Selene when she unleashed. Silence fell across the battlefield. Then horns sounded from Sarakar's army. Not retreat, regrouping. Selene collapsed against the battlements. Her legs shook. Sweat dripped down her spine despite the cold. Using that much power felt like running a marathon while her bones were on fire. Vaelor caught her, held her steady. "How long until you can do that again?" he asked quietly. "Hours," Selene managed. "Maybe longer. That took everything." "Then we hold until you recover," Vaelor said. He gestured. Defenders moved to reinforce damaged sections. Casualties were dragged to the healing stations. Someone brought water. The wall prepared for the next assault. It came 30 minutes later. This time Sarakar sent 500 wolves. They hit 3 sections of wall simultaneously, spread the defenders thin, forced them to choose what to protect. Hollow Ridge bled. Selene couldn't help. Her power was still recovering. She watched from the tower as wolves died defending their home. Watched her people fall. Watched the mathematics of attrition play out in real time. They were losing, not quickly, but inevitably. Vaelor fought on the western wall. His wolf was a shadow of death. Every movement precise, every strike lethal. He'd been trained for war since childhood, and it showed, but even he couldn't be everywhere. Kael held the southern gate. Morkant anchored the eastern approach. Rhiannon surprised everyone by fighting with vicious competence on the northern wall. But it wasn't enough. By noon, they'd lost 150 defenders. By evening, another 200. The sun set on a fortress that was slowly dying. Selene sat in the war room with blood on her hands and exhaustion in her bones. Her power had recovered enough to use again. But one more blast wouldn't change the outcome. Sarakar had thousands of wolves. She had one body and finite strength. The math didn't work. Vaelor entered. He looked like he'd fought through a dozen battles. Because he had. His armor was dented. Blood matted his hair. But his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. "We need to talk," he said. "About surrender?" Kael asked. He sat in the corner, sharpening a blade that was already razor sharp, just keeping his hands busy. "About reality," Vaelor said. He moved to the map spread across the table. "Sarakar isn't trying to take the fortress. He's bleeding us dry. Every hour we hold costs us wolves we can't replace. He can afford attrition." "We can't." "So what's the play?" Morkant asked. The Alpha of Hollow Ridge looked older than he had a week ago, worn down by watching his territory crumble. "We break the siege," Vaelor said. "Take the fight to Sarakar, directly." "That's suicide," Morkant said flatly. "Staying here is suicide," Vaelor countered. "Just slower. At least if we attack, we choose the terms." "With what force?" Kael asked. "We're down to 500 defenders. Most are wounded. Sarakar has thousands of fresh wolves." "We don't need thousands," Vaelor said. He looked at Selene. "We need her." Everyone turned. Selene felt the weight of their attention, the expectation, the desperate hope that she was some kind of miracle wrapped in skin and moonfire. She wasn't a miracle. She was just a woman who'd learned to survive. "What are you asking me to do?" she said quietly. "Channel everything you have into one strike," Vaelor said. "Target Sarakar's command center. Kill him and his inner circle. Without leadership, the army will fracture." "And when I collapse?" Selene asked. "Because I will collapse. Using that much power will put me down for days, maybe permanently." "Then I'll protect you while you recover," Vaelor said. His voice carried absolute certainty. "Against an army," Kael said. "You and what force?" "Me and whoever's willing to die buying her time," Vaelor said. The room went silent. This was the plan. Selene would destroy herself trying to kill Sarikar. Vaelor would sacrifice himself protecting her. And maybe if they got lucky, enough of Sarikar's forces would break to give the survivors a chance. It was barely a plan at all. It was desperation dressed up as strategy. "I'll do it," Selene said. Vaelor's expression didn't change, but she felt something through the bond. Relief and grief twisted together. "We leave at midnight," he said. "Small strike force. Fast and quiet. We get as close as possible before they spot us. Then Selene hits them with everything and we fight our way out." "And if we don't make it out?" Kael asked. "Then we don't," Vaelor said simply, "but at least we'll take Sarikar with us." He dismissed the others. Soon it was just Selene and Vaelor in the war room. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Selene spoke. "This is a terrible plan." "I know," Vaelor said. "We're probably going to die." "I know," he repeated. She moved around the table, stood in front of him. His eyes were gray in the lamplight, exhausted, determined, still burning with that fierce intelligence that had drawn her from the first moment. "I love you," she said. It felt important to say it now, while she could. Vaelor's hand came up to cup her face. "I love you too, more than I thought I could love anything." "Then let's make it count," Selene said. They kissed. The bond flared between them. For a moment, the exhaustion and fear faded. There was only them, only this connection that defied logic and politics and survival itself. When they broke apart, Vaelor rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive this," he said quietly, "I'm building you a library. Biggest one in the Empire. Fill it with every book ever written about starborn bloodlines, about ancient magic, about everything they tried to hide from you. If we survive this," Selene said, "I'm making you take a vacation, somewhere far from politics and war, just us." "Deal," Vaelor said. They held each other as the clock ticked toward midnight, held each other like the world was ending, because it probably was. The strike force assembled in the courtyard, 30 wolves, veterans all. They knew the odds, knew they were marching toward death. But they came anyway. Because Vaelor had asked, because Selene had earned their respect through 3 days of bleeding beside them on the walls. Because sometimes wolves chose loyalty over survival. Kael checked weapons, distributed supplies. His face was carefully neutral, but Selene saw the tension in his shoulders. He knew this was a one-way mission. Isolde appeared from the shadows. Her grandmother looked ancient in the moonlight. She moved to Selene and pressed something into her hand, a small crystal vial. The liquid inside glowed faintly silver. "Drink this before you channel," Isolde said. "It will amplify your power, give you one massive burst. After that I'm empty," Selene finished. The old woman nodded. "Use it wisely. You only get one shot." Selene tucked the vial into her belt. "Thank you for everything." Isolde's expression softened. "Your mother would be proud. You've become exactly what she hoped, strong enough to break every chain they tried to wrap around you." The words hit harder than Selene expected. She pulled her grandmother into a hug, felt thin arms wrap around her, felt decades of love and protection in that embrace. When they separated, Isolde was crying. "Come back," the old woman whispered. Selene didn't make promises she couldn't keep. The strike force moved out. They went on foot. Wolf form was quieter but less flexible if they needed to fight. They moved through darkness beyond the fortress walls, circled wide around Sarikar's main forces, approached his command camp from the north where scouts were thinnest. It took 2 hours. 2 hours of crawling through frozen mud, of avoiding patrols, of Selene's heart hammering so hard she thought it would give them away. Every minute stretched. Every sound felt amplified. They reached the ridge overlooking Sarikar's command center. It was massive, tents arranged in military precision, guard rotations that looked professional. At the center stood a pavilion larger than the others. That's where Sarikar would be, where his inner circle planned and strategized and celebrated their inevitable victory. Selene studied the layout, counted guards, measured distances. Her power stirred beneath her skin. Ready, eager. She pulled out Isolde's vial. Vaelor's hand caught her wrist. "Once you drink that, there's no going back," he said. "I know," Selene said. She drank. The liquid tasted like lightning and starlight. It burned down her throat, sank into her blood. Her power exploded. Moonfire flooded her system. She felt strong enough to crack mountains, strong enough to burn armies. She also felt her life force draining. The vial wasn't just amplification, it was sacrifice. It was converting her essence into raw power. When it ran out, there might not be anything left. Selene had known. She'd drunk it anyway. She stood, raised her hands, let her power build. Moonfire gathered above her palms. Not a sphere this time. A spear. Pure concentrated destruction aimed directly at Sarakar's pavilion. The guards spotted her. Alarms sounded. Too late. Selene released everything. The Moonfire spear shot forward like a meteor. It struck the pavilion dead center. The explosion was apocalyptic. White fire consumed the command center. Tents disintegrated. Wolves caught in the blast simply vanished. The shockwave knocked trees flat. The light was bright enough to turn night to day. For 10 seconds, Selene was a goddess of destruction. Then the power ran out. She collapsed. Vaelor caught her. "They're coming," he said. "Can you move?" Selene tried. Her legs wouldn't respond. Her whole body felt hollow, empty, like she'd burned through everything that made her alive. "No," she managed. "Run. Leave me." "Not a chance," Vaelor said. The strike force formed a circle around them. 30 wolves against an army that was recovering from shock and turning their attention to the ridge. This was it, the last stand. Wolves charged up the slope. Hundreds, thousands, more than could be counted. The defenders met them with steel and claws, an absolute refusal to go down easy. Kael fought like a demon. Morkant appeared with reinforcements from the fortress. Even Rhiannon was there, her wolf tearing through enemies with savage joy. But it wasn't enough. The defenders fell one by one, overwhelmed by numbers, by exhaustion, by the simple mathematics of war. Vaelor stood over Selene, his sword carved through anything that got close. But even he was slowing. Blood poured from a dozen wounds. His breathing was ragged. He was dying. They were all dying. Then something changed. A horn sounded from the east. Not Sarakar's forces. A different call. Familiar. The royal banners of Nightspire appeared on the horizon. Vaelor's reinforcements had arrived. 3,000 wolves poured onto the battlefield. Fresh, organized, led by commanders who'd served under Vaelor for years. They hit Sarakar's army from the flank. The collision was catastrophic. Sarakar's forces broke. Not immediately, but the momentum shifted. Instead of hunting down a strike force, they were defending against a real army. Instead of celebrating victory, they were fighting for survival. The battlefield descended into chaos. Vaelor grabbed Selene, started carrying her back toward Hollow Ridge. Kael and the surviving strike force formed a protective barrier. They fought through enemy wolves, through smoke and blood and screaming. Every step was a battle. They made it maybe a quarter mile. Then someone tackled Vaelor from the side. He went down hard. Selene rolled from his grip, couldn't get up, could barely breathe. A wolf stood over Vaelor, huge, gray with red-tinged fur. His eyes burned with stolen power. Sarakar had survived. The Lord was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Half his face was burned, but he was alive and furious and looking at Vaelor like prey. He shifted to human form. "You should have killed me properly," Sarakar said. His voice was ruined, smoke damaged, but still coherent. "Now you'll watch everything you love burn before I let you die." He raised his hand, claws extended, aimed for Vaelor's throat. Then another wolf appeared, small, fast, vicious. Rhiannon, Selene's half-sister, hit Sarakar like a missile. They went down in a tangle of fur and claws. Rolled, fought. Rhiannon was outmatched but refused to stop. She tore into him with everything she had, buying seconds. Vaelor surged to his feet. His sword was gone. Didn't matter. He shifted. His midnight wolf lunged at Sarakar. The two alphas collided. It was brutal, primal. Two apex predators trying to tear each other apart. They were both wounded, both exhausted, both refusing to quit. Selene watched through fading vision. Tried to help. Couldn't. Her power was gone. Her body was failing. She was dying and couldn't do anything except witness. Vaelor's jaws closed on Sarakar's throat, but Sarakar's claws sank into Vaelor's chest. They both went down. No! Selene tried to scream. Nothing came out. Kael was there. He shifted, grabbed Sarakar's wolf, ripped him off Vaelor, threw him into a group of royal guards who descended with weapons drawn. Sarakar died badly, torn apart by wolves who'd watched him torture their kingdoms for years. It wasn't clean. It wasn't honorable. It was justice delivered through fangs and fury. Selene didn't care about Sarakar. She crawled to Vaelor. He'd shifted back to human. Blood poured from wounds in his chest, deep, fatal. His breathing was wet, damaged lungs. He was dying. No, Selene managed. Her voice barely worked. Stay with me. Vaelor's eyes found hers. He smiled. It was soft, genuine, nothing like the hard edges he usually wore. We won, he said. His voice was faint. You did it. We did it, Selene said. Together, like we promised. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. Build that library, he said. Fill it with everything they tried to hide. Teach others. Make sure no one else suffers like you did. Tears blurred Selene's vision. You're going to help me. We're both going to survive this. We have to. Vaelor's grip loosened, his breathing slowed. I love you, he whispered. My queen. My equal. Mine. His eyes closed. His chest stopped moving. The bond between them shattered. Selene felt it break, felt half her soul tear away, felt the connection that had defined her for the past week simply cease to exist. She screamed. The sound was raw, animal. It carried across the battlefield. Wolves stopped fighting to look, to witness the moment an Alpha King died and his mate broke with him. Kael appeared beside her, put his hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Selene couldn't respond, couldn't breathe. The world had ended and she was still somehow alive inside it. Then something moved beneath her hand. Vaelor's chest rose. One breath. Shallow. Barely there. But there. He's alive, Selene gasped. She looked at Kael. He's still alive. We need healers. Now. Kael was already moving, shouting orders. Within seconds, wolves surrounded them. Medical supplies appeared. Someone with healing magic pressed hands to Vaelor's chest. The wounds began to close. Slowly. Too slowly. But closing. You don't get to leave me, Selene told Vaelor, even though he couldn't hear. You promised me a vacation. You promised me a life after this. You don't break promises. His breathing steadied, just slightly, just enough. Hours passed in chaos. The battle ended. Sarakar's forces surrendered or fled. The survivors returned to Hollow Ridge. Casualties were counted. 300 defenders dead, another 500 wounded. The fortress was damaged but standing. They'd won, at a cost that felt like losing. Vaelor was moved to the healing chambers. Selene refused to leave his side. She sat beside his bed and watched his chest rise and fall. Watched healers work. Watched the sun rise through windows that overlooked a battlefield still smoking with destruction. Kael appeared in the doorway. You should rest, he said. I'll rest when he wakes up, Selene said. The second in command was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. There's something you need to know. Selene looked at him. What? Kael's expression was carefully neutral. Too neutral, like he was holding something back. We captured one of Sarakar's commanders. He's been talking, trying to buy mercy. And? Selene asked. He says Sarakar had help. Inside Hollow Ridge, someone feeding him information about defenses, about Vaelor's plans, about you. The words landed like ice water. Who? Selene asked. Kael looked at her. His eyes were sad. Your father. The room tilted. No, Selene said. Her voice sounded foreign. That's not possible. The commander has letters, Kael said. Correspondence between Sarakar and Morkant dating back months. Your father sold information in exchange for Sarakar leaving Hollow Ridge untouched after he conquered Nightspire. Selene felt her world crack. Again. Differently. She stood on legs that shook. Where is he? Being held in the lower cells, Kael said. Vaelor's orders. He suspected betrayal but couldn't prove it until now. Selene looked at Vaelor, at the Alpha King who'd nearly died protecting her, who'd fought an army for her, who'd loved her when everyone else saw failure. Then she looked at Kael. Take me to him, she said. Her voice was cold, empty. The voice of someone who'd broken and remade themselves into something new, something harder. Kyle nodded. They left the healing chambers, left Vaelor to recover alone. Because Selene had a father to confront, and this time she wasn't the broken Omega begging for acceptance. She was a starborn who'd burned an army, and Alpha Morkant was about to learn what that meant. Eek. The cells beneath Hollow Ridge were older than the fortress above, carved from mountain stone, damp, cold, designed for wolves who'd committed crimes so severe that death was mercy. Morkant sat in the deepest cell. He looked up when Selene entered. His expression cycled through surprise, fear, calculation, always calculating, always looking for the angle that would save him. "Daughter," he said, voice careful, measured. "Let me explain." "Don't call me that," Selene interrupted. Her voice echoed off stone. "You lost that right when you sold me to Sarikar." Morkant stood. "I was protecting the pack. Sarikar was going to win. I had to make sure Hollow Ridge survived." "By helping him kill Vaelor?" Selene asked. "By giving him information that got 300 wolves killed today?" "I didn't know he'd attack here," Morkant said. "He promised to leave us alone. You believe the wolf who dissects Starborn for entertainment?" Selene's laugh was bitter. "You're not just a traitor, you're an idiot." Morkant's expression hardened. "Watch your tongue. I'm still your alpha." "You're nothing," Selene said. "You're a coward who sold his own daughter because she reminded you that power isn't everything, that sometimes the weakest-looking wolf is the one who survives." She moved closer to the bars. "You spent 24 years making me believe I was broken, that I was worthless, that I deserved to be hidden away like a shameful secret. And you know what the worst part is?" "What?" Morkant asked. His voice had gone flat. "I almost believed you," Selene said. "I almost let your hate define me. If Vaelor hadn't seen through it." She stopped, breathed, forced down the rage that wanted to burn through her control. "He's going to die because of you," she finally said. "Maybe not today, but those wounds will weaken him, age him. Every breath will hurt because you gave Sarikar the opening to strike." "I was protecting the pack," Morkant repeated, like saying it enough times would make it true. "No," Selene said. "You were protecting yourself, like you always do, like you did when you let Mother die, when you let me suffer, when you sacrificed everyone except your own pride." Morkant's jaw tightened. "What do you want? Revenge? Kill me then. Prove you're exactly what I always said you were." Selene studied him. This man who'd shaped her childhood through cruelty and neglect, who'd represented everything she thought she needed to earn, whose approval she'd craved even as he crushed her. She felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no desperate need for him to finally see her worth. Just emptiness where the connection should have been. "I don't want revenge," she said quietly. "I want you to live knowing you failed, that your daughter became a queen while you rotted in a cell. That history will remember you as the coward who betrayed an empire to save his own skin." She turned to leave. Morkant grabbed the bars. "You can't do this. I'm an alpha. I have rights." "You're a traitor," Selene said without turning around. "And traitors don't have rights. They have consequences." She walked away. His shouting followed her up the stairs. Faded. Died. Behind her, Alpha Morkant remained in darkness. Ahead, the sun was rising. Selene returned to Vaelor's chambers, sat beside him, took his hand. His eyes opened, focused on her. He looked weak. Mortal. Nothing like the invincible Alpha King who'd conquered territories. "You're awake," Selene said. Relief flooded through her. "How long?" Vaelor asked. His voice was rough. 8 hours, Selene said. "You nearly died." Again, he smiled weakly. "Getting to be a habit." "Stop it," Selene said. "Stop nearly dying. I can't keep watching it happen." Vaelor's hand squeezed hers. "Did we win?" "Yes," Selene said. "Sarakar's dead. His army scattered. Nightspire is saved. We won." "At what cost?" Vaelor asked. Selene told him. About the casualties. About her father's betrayal. About the empire that was fractured and needed rebuilding. About the fact that neither of them were the same people who'd met in Hollow Ridge a week ago. They'd been broken. Forged. changed into something harder and sharper and maybe capable of leading together. "What do we do now?" Selene asked. Vaelor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "We build something new. Not an empire held together by fear, something earned through truth, through justice, through proving that power and conscience aren't opposites." He looked at her. "You wanted to change how I rule. Now's your chance. We do it together or not at all." Selene felt the weight of that responsibility, the impossibility of it. Then she thought about everyone who'd died thinking she was worthless, everyone who'd underestimated the broken Omega, everyone who'd been wrong. Together, she agreed. They sat in silence as dawn broke across a battlefield littered with proof that even the strongest could fall, but also proof that sometimes the ones everyone dismissed were the ones who survived, who rose, who rewrote every rule about what power meant and who deserved to wield it. Selene Vaeris had been buried alive her entire life. Now she was climbing out of the grave, and nothing would ever bury her again. 3 weeks after the siege ended, the empire began to fracture. Not from external enemies, from something more dangerous. Internal collapse. The kind of slow-motion disintegration that turned kingdoms into cautionary tales. Selene watched it happen from the council chambers of Nightspire. The black citadel that had stood for 2 centuries felt different now. Emptier. Like Vaelor's near death had stripped away whatever magic made wolves believe in invincibility. 7 territories had refused to acknowledge Vaelor's authority after the battle. They cited his relationship with a Starborn as evidence of corruption, called him compromised, weak, said an Alpha King who'd nearly died for a woman wasn't fit to rule an empire built on strength. The accusations were calculated poison dressed as concern, and they were working. Kael stood across the war table. His expression was grim. He'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Gray streaked his temples now. New scars crossed his knuckles. "We've lost contact with the Western territories," he said. "No responses to diplomatic envoys. Trade caravans are being turned back at borders. They're preparing for something. Civil war," Vaelor said. His voice was flat. He sat in a chair designed for command but looked like he was being slowly crushed by its weight. The wounds Sarikar had given him were healing, slowly. But the damage went deeper than flesh. You could see it in how carefully he moved, how his breathing still caught on deep inhales, how pain flickered behind his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Some wounds changed you permanently. "How many territories are we talking about?" Selene asked. 7 confirmed, Kael said. "Another 4 likely. If they unite under one banner, they'll have enough force to challenge Nightspire directly," Vaelor finished. He stood, moved to the window, looked out over his capital. The city sprawled below. Obsidian towers, silver rivers of torchlight. An empire that had taken 14 years to build and might take 14 days to destroy. Selene studied him. Really looked at the man who'd conquered nations and killed his own father and built peace through terror. He looked exhausted, not just physically, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from carrying impossible weight for too long. There was a philosophy about leadership that most wolves learned too late. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. It strips away every comfortable lie you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. A weak wolf given power becomes a tyrant. A strong wolf becomes something else. Something that understands the difference between authority and violence. Vaelor had been strong, but strength alone wasn't enough anymore. "What are our options?" Selene asked. Kael pulled out reports. Laid them across the table. "We have 3,000 loyal wolves in Nightspire. Maybe another 2,000 scattered across territories that still recognize Vaelor's rule. The Western Coalition has at least 8,000. Better numbers. Better positioning." "So we're outnumbered," Selene said. "Significantly," Kael agreed. "Then we don't fight them head on," Vaelor said. He turned from the window. His eyes were sharp again, calculating. "We force them to fracture before they can unite. Diplomatic warfare. Offer incentives to territories on the fence. Threaten the ones plotting against us. Make alliance more appealing than rebellion." "That's a slow strategy," Kael said. "We might not have time." "Then we make time," Vaelor said. "How?" Selene asked. "By giving them what they're really afraid of," Vaelor said. He looked at her. "You." The room went silent. Selene felt ice slide down her spine. "What are you talking about?" The Western territories aren't afraid of me, Vaelor said. His voice was clinical, detached. They've seen me bleed, seen me nearly die. I'm not invincible anymore. But you, he gestured at her, you destroyed an army. You channeled power that shouldn't exist. You're the unknown variable, the thing they can't predict or control. That terrifies them more than any throne. So what? Selene said. Her voice came out harder than intended. You want me to threaten them into submission, become the monster they're claiming I am? I want you to remind them why crossing us is suicide, Vaelor said. That's not who I am, Selene said. It might need to be, Vaelor said, for a while, until the Empire stabilizes. Selene felt something crack inside her chest. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading since the siege ended. The moment Vaelor stopped being the man who'd loved her and became the king who needed her. There was a difference, and that difference might destroy them both. I won't be your weapon, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to be, Vaelor said. I'm asking you to be a queen. Queens make hard choices. You wanted to change how we rule. This is what that looks like. Compromise. Strategy. Using everything at our disposal to prevent bloodshed. By threatening bloodshed, Selene said. Yes, Vaelor said simply. Sometimes the only way to prevent war is to make the alternative more terrifying. Kael looked between them. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was a fault line opening. I'll give you two some privacy, he said. He left quickly. The door closed. Selene and Vaelor stared at each other across the war table. You're asking me to become what my father always said I was, Selene said. A threat. Something to be feared and controlled. I'm asking you to be powerful, Vaelor said. There's a difference. Is there? Selene asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want me to play the monster so you can play the reasonable diplomat. The same strategy that built this empire on fear in the first place. It works, Vaelor said. At what cost? Selene demanded. Vaelor's expression went cold. At the cost of survival. That's the only cost that matters. No, Selene said. Her voice shook. It's not. We had this conversation. You promised we'd build something different. Something based on truth and justice. Not just better propaganda. That was before 7 territories decided to rebel, Vaelor said. Plans change. Adapt or die. Then maybe we deserve to die, Selene said. The words hung in the air. Vaelor's expression didn't change. But something flickered behind his eyes. Hurt. Betrayal. The look of someone who'd opened themselves completely and just watched it get used against them. You don't mean that, he said quietly. I don't know what I mean anymore, Selene said. She felt tears burning, refused to let them fall. You nearly died 3 weeks ago. You promised we'd do this together, build something new. And the first real test we face, you want to go back to the old ways. Because the old ways kept an empire alive for 14 years, Vaelor said. His voice was rising. What you're suggesting is idealism. Beautiful, noble, and completely useless against wolves who want us dead. Then teach me, Selene said. Her voice broke. Show me how to be what you need without losing who I am. Vaelor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired, defeated. I don't know if that's possible. The admission landed like a blade between ribs. Selene realized something then. Something that made her chest ache. They'd survived Sarikar, survived betrayal, survived a siege that should have killed them both. But they might not survive peace, because war was simple. Fight or die. Protect or lose. Love or mourn. Peace demanded complexity. Compromise. The slow grinding destruction of watching someone you love make choices you can't support. I need air, Selene said. She left before he could respond. Walked through corridors lined with ancient weapons and newer scars, emerged into a courtyard where snow fell thick enough to muffle sound. She shifted. Let her wolf take over. Crystalline fur blazed in darkness. She ran, through the city, past guards who scrambled out of her way, past citizens who stopped and stared and whispered, past the gates into forest beyond where trees were old enough to remember when wolves were simple predators instead of politicians. She ran until exhaustion forced her to stop, shifted back to human, collapsed against a tree trunk. Let herself cry. Because she loved Vaelor, loved him with an intensity that bordered on religion. But love didn't solve political problems, didn't rebuild empires, didn't make impossible choices easier. Sometimes love just made you hurt more. A branch snapped behind her. Selene spun, claws extended, power gathered in her palms. Isolde stepped into the clearing. Her grandmother looked ancient and patient. She carried a thick fur that she wrapped around Selene's shoulders without comment. They sat together in snow and silence. Finally, Isolde spoke. Your mother faced this same choice, power or principle. She chose principle. It got her killed. I know, Selene whispered. But she never regretted it, Isolde continued, even at the end, even when she knew they'd found her. She said some things were worth dying for. That being right mattered more than being safe. The old woman looked at Selene. Vaelor is trying to keep you safe. That's all he knows how to do. 14 years of ruling taught him that survival is victory. He doesn't understand yet that some victories cost more than defeat. How do I make him understand? Selene asked. You don't, Isolde said. You show him by being exactly who you are, by refusing to compromise the things that make you different from every other wolf who'd use power as a weapon. And if that destroys us, Selene asked, if the Empire falls because I won't be what he needs, then the Empire deserves to fall, Isolde said. Her voice was fierce, uncompromising. Your mother taught me that. Some structures are rotten at the foundation. Tearing them down is mercy. Selene absorbed that, felt it settle in her bones. They sat until the snow stopped falling. Then Isolde squeezed her shoulder once and disappeared back into the forest like smoke. Selene returned to Nightspire alone. The Western Territories made their move 5 days later. Not with armies, with something more effective. A public declaration signed by 11 alphas calling for Vaelor's abdication. They cited instability, poor judgment, compromised loyalty. They claimed he'd put personal attachment above the Empire's safety. They demanded he step down or face unified opposition. It was a political assassination dressed as concern. And it worked. Within 24 hours, 3 more territories joined the coalition. Trade routes closed. Diplomatic channels went silent. The empire that Vaelor had spent 14 years building was tearing itself apart. Selene stood in the throne room watching him read the declaration. His expression was carved from ice, but his hands shook. Just slightly. Just enough that she could see the cracks forming in whatever armor he wore. Kael stood beside the throne looking like he wanted to murder everyone who'd signed the document. This is treason, Kael said. Open rebellion. We respond with force. We can't, Vaelor said. His voice was hollow. We don't have the numbers. Fighting now means civil war will lose. Then what do we do? Kael asked. Vaelor looked at Selene. His eyes were gray and exhausted and asking a question he didn't want to voice. She knew what he was asking. Would she do what was necessary? Would she be the weapon that kept the Empire alive? Would she sacrifice principle for survival? Selene thought about her mother, about Isolde's words, about 24 years of being told she was nothing, and the 3 weeks since she'd discovered she was everything. She thought about what kind of queen she wanted to be. Then she made a choice that would define the rest of her life. No, she said. Vaelor's expression didn't change, but something died behind his eyes. No, he repeated. I won't threaten them, Selene said. Her voice was steady, clear. I won't use my power to force submission. That's exactly what they're afraid of, exactly what they're claiming we'll do. If we prove them right, we lose anyway. Then what do you suggest? Vaelor asked. His tone had gone cold, formal, the voice of a king talking to a subject instead of a man talking to his mate. The change hurt more than any wound. We expose them, Selene said. We show the Empire exactly what these alphas are, what they've done, what they really want. We fight with truth instead of terror. Truth takes time, Kael said. We don't have time. Then we make them give us time, Selene said. She moved to the war table, started pulling reports. We have intelligence on half these alphas. Corruption, abuse, crimes they've buried. We release everything, force them to defend their own actions instead of attacking ours. That's still warfare, Vaelor said. Just different ammunition. Yes, Selene agreed. But it's warfare that proves we're different, that we enforce justice equally, that power doesn't equal immunity. She looked at him. You built an empire on fear. Help me build one on accountability. Vaelor studied her. She could see him calculating, weighing options, trying to reconcile what he needed with what she was offering. Finally, he spoke. If we do this your way and it fails, thousands die. The empire collapses. Everything I've built turns to ash. Can you live with that? Can you live with becoming the tyrant they're claiming you are? Selene countered. They stared at each other across the table. Two wolves who'd found each other in darkness, who'd survived impossible odds, who loved each other with an intensity that made the world feel small, and who might be standing on opposite sides of an unbridgeable gap. All right, Vaelor said finally. His voice was quiet, defeated. We do it your way. You don't sound convinced, Selene said. I'm not, Vaelor admitted. But I trust you, even when I don't trust your strategy. The words should have felt like victory. They felt like grief. The next week was brutal. Selene worked with Kael and a team of intelligence operatives to compile evidence. They had files on corruption spanning decades, alphas who'd murdered rivals, embezzled resources, violated pack law, committed atrocities they'd hidden behind political immunity. The evidence was damning, but gathering it was one thing. Weaponizing it was another. Selene spent 16-hour days in archives and interrogation rooms, spoke with witnesses who'd been silenced, reviewed documents that painted a picture of systematic abuse across multiple territories. The wolves calling for Vaelor's abdication weren't concerned citizens. They were criminals afraid of justice. Vaelor watched her work with an expression she couldn't read. He barely spoke unless necessary. The distance between them grew, not from anger, from something worse. Resignation, the slow acceptance that they might want different things badly enough to destroy what they'd built together. On the 7th day, Selene finished compiling the evidence. She presented it to Vaelor in his private chambers. He looked thinner than he had a week ago, like the weight of the crown was physically crushing him. This is everything, she said. Enough to discredit half the coalition, enough to turn public opinion. We release it tomorrow and watch their support collapse. Vaelor studied the documents. His expression was unreadable. How did you get some of this? He asked. These records were sealed, classified at the highest levels. I have my methods, Selene said. You broke laws, Vaelor said. It wasn't a question. I enforce justice, Selene corrected. There's a difference. Vaelor set down the papers, looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. You're becoming exactly what I am, he said quietly. Someone who justifies any action if the outcome serves a greater good. That's not principle. That's pragmatism with better marketing. The accusation landed like a physical blow. I'm trying to save your empire, Selene said. By compromising everything you said you believed in, Vaelor said. By stealing classified information. By preparing to destroy wolves through exposure instead of combat. That's still destruction, Selene. Just cleaner. Then tell me what you want, Selene demanded. Her voice was rising. You said we'd do this together, build something new. But every suggestion I make, you find a way to say it's not enough, not practical, not realistic. What do you actually want from me? Vaelor stood, moved to the window. His reflection looked like a ghost. I want you to understand that there are no clean choices, he said. That leadership means getting blood on your hands regardless of method. That the only difference between my violence and your exposure is how we justify it afterward. He turned to face her. I want you to stop pretending we can build an empire on morality. Empires are built on control, on fear, on the willingness to do terrible things so others don't have to. I've known that since I was 16. You're learning it now, and it's destroying you the same way it destroyed me. His voice broke on the last word. Selene felt tears burning, because he was right and wrong simultaneously. Right that leadership demanded sacrifice. Wrong that sacrifice meant surrendering every principle. There had to be a middle ground. There had to be a way to be powerful without becoming a monster. I refuse to believe the only options are tyranny or extinction, Selene said. Her voice shook but held. I refuse to accept that love and power can't coexist. That being right means being weak. Then you're naive, Vaelor said, and naive wolves don't survive. Maybe, Selene said. Or maybe you've been alone so long you forgot what it means to have someone fight beside you instead of beneath you. The words hit harder than she'd intended. Vaelor flinched, actually flinched, like she'd struck him. They stared at each other across the chamber. Two wolves who'd found everything they'd been searching for, and who might be too broken to keep it. "Tomorrow we release the evidence," Selene said. Her voice was flat, empty. "We do it my way, and if it fails, we do it mine," Vaelor finished. They both knew what that meant. War, real war, the kind that ended with one side extinct. Selene left his chambers, walked through corridors that felt foreign now, found Isolde waiting in her own rooms. Her grandmother took one look at her face and pulled her into an embrace. "He doesn't believe it will work," Selene whispered against the old woman's shoulder. "He's afraid," Isolde said. "Terrified wolves either fight or flee. He doesn't know how to do anything else." "I'm losing him," Selene said. "Even if we survive this, I'm losing him." "Then you have a choice to make," Isolde said. Her voice was gentle but firm. "Be the wolf he needs and lose yourself. Or be the wolf you are and risk losing him." "That's not a choice," Selene said. "That's a nightmare." "Most important choices are," Isolde said. She held Selene while she cried, held her while the Empire continued its slow collapse beyond the citadel walls, held her while the clock ticked toward a tomorrow that would determine everything. The next morning, Selene released the evidence. She didn't do it quietly. She did it publicly. Had copies distributed to every major territory, posted in town squares, read aloud in markets. She used Vaelor's intelligence network and her own growing reputation to ensure no one could ignore it. The response was immediate and catastrophic. 3 of the alphas in the coalition were arrested by their own packs. Citizens revolted against leaders who'd lied for decades. Trade embargoes collapsed as territories realized they'd been manipulated by criminals masquerading as concerned politicians. The coalition didn't just fracture, it detonated. Within 48 hours, 8 territories withdrew their support. Within 72, 2 more collapsed into internal power struggles. The Western rebellion that had threatened to destroy Nightspire died not from violence but from truth. Selene watched it happen from the tower and felt no victory. Only exhaustion. Kael found her there as the sun set on the 3rd day. "You did it," he said. His voice carried something close to awe. "You destroyed an army without drawing a blade." "I exposed criminals," Selene corrected. "That's all?" "That's everything," Kael said. He moved to stand beside her, looked out over the city. "Vaelor spent 14 years teaching wolves to fear him. You just taught them to trust you. That's more dangerous to his enemies than any weapon." "Where is he?" Selene asked. "In his chambers," Kael said. "He hasn't come out since you released the evidence. I think he's processing." "Processing what?" Selene asked. "That you were right," Kael said. "And he was wrong. That's not easy for a man who's built his identity on never being wrong." Selene left the tower, walked through the citadel to Vaelor's chambers. The guards let her pass without question. She'd earned that right through blood and survival. She found him sitting at his desk, papers spread everywhere. His hands were in his hair. He looked up when she entered. They stared at each other. Then Vaelor spoke. "I'm sorry." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of someone who rarely apologized for anything. Selene closed the door, moved to stand across from him. "For what?" she asked. "For not trusting you," Vaelor said. "For assuming force was the only answer. For trying to make you into something you're not because I was too afraid to become something different." He stood, moved around the desk, stopped in front of her. "You were right. About everything. About accountability. About truth. About building something better instead of just something stronger." His hand came up to cup her face. "I spent so long believing power meant isolation that I forgot what it felt like to have someone stand beside me. You reminded me. Then I nearly destroyed it because old habits are easier than change." Selene felt tears sliding down her face. "I thought I'd lost you." "You nearly did," Vaelor admitted. "I nearly lost myself. But watching what you did these past 3 days," he shook his head, smiled. It was soft and genuine and completely unguarded. "You're terrifying. Do you know that? You're more dangerous than any army because you make wolves want to be better. That's power I never understood. Power I need to learn." "Teach me," he said quietly. "Show me how to be the king you need me to be. The one this empire deserves." Selene pulled him into a kiss. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like salt from tears. The bond between them flared back to life, stronger than before, forged through conflict instead of broken by it. When they broke apart, Vaelor rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "Not because fate decided it, because you challenged every assumption I made about strength and weakness, because you refused to let me hide behind cruelty disguised as pragmatism." "I love you too," Selene whispered, "even when you're insufferable." "Especially then," Vaelor said. They stood together as darkness fell over Nightspire, stood together and planned how to rebuild an empire, not through fear, through something harder and more permanent: trust. But empires built on blood don't change easily. That lesson came crashing down 3 days later when scouts reported movement on the northern border, not from the collapsed Western coalition, from something worse. Kyle burst into the war room where Selene and Vaelor were reviewing reconstruction plans. His face was ashen. "We have a problem," he said. Everyone turned. "The territories we exposed," Kyle continued. "The Alphas we arrested. They've unified under a new banner. Not political anymore. Military. They're calling themselves the Purge Coalition." "What do they want?" Vaelor asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Your head," Kyle said. He looked at Selene. "And hers. They're claiming you've corrupted the Alpha King, that starborn influence is destroying the Empire, that the only solution is extermination." "How many?" Selene asked quietly. 6,000 confirmed, Kale said. "Maybe more. They're not asking for negotiation. They're marching on Nightspire with the explicit goal of killing everyone who stands with you." "When?" Vaelor asked. "They'll be here in 5 days, Kale said. The room went silent. Selene felt ice slide through her veins. This was it, the real test. Not political maneuvering, not diplomatic warfare, actual survival. 6,000 wolves wanted them dead, and they had 5 days to prepare. "We fight," Vaelor said. His voice was flat, final. No more strategies, no more hoping for better options. They want war. We give them extinction. He looked at Selene. "This time we do it together, your way and mine. Truth and terror. Whatever it takes to make sure our people survive." Selene felt her power stir beneath her skin, felt her wolf rise, felt something else rising too. The realization that sometimes the only way to build peace was to first destroy everything that threatened it. She nodded. Together, she agreed. They had 5 days to prepare for the battle that would decide the Empire's future. 5 days to teach an army what happened when you threatened wolves who'd already lost everything except each other. 5 days to prove that love and power weren't opposites. They were the same force expressed differently. And that force, properly wielded, could reshape the world. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, an Alpha King and his starborn queen prepared for war. And somewhere in the darkness, 6,000 wolves marched toward their doom. They just didn't know it yet. The Purge Coalition arrived on the 5th day exactly as predicted. 6,000 wolves materialized on the northern plain like a stain spreading across snow. Their banners were black cloth marked with a single crimson symbol, a broken crown pierced by crossed blades. The message was unambiguous. They'd come to end the rule of Vaelor Draven and erase the starborn threat permanently. Selene stood on Nightspire's highest tower, watching the army assemble. Dawn light turned their armor into scattered fire. She could feel them even at this distance. 6,000 heartbeats, 6,000 wolves convinced they were righteous. That extermination was justice. That fear disguised as tradition gave them permission to murder anyone different. She'd spent her entire life being different. Now difference had become her weapon. Vaelor appeared beside her. He moved quieter than he used to. The wounds from Sarikar had healed but left something permanent behind. A reminder that even the strongest could be broken. That invincibility was a myth wolves told themselves until reality proved otherwise. But myths had power too. Sometimes the lie was what kept you standing. "They're here," Vaelor said. His voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone who'd accepted what was coming and made peace with it. "How many do we have?" Selene asked. 3,200, Vaelor said. Kale confirmed the count an hour ago. "Everyone who could fight. Everyone loyal enough to die for what we're building." "We're outnumbered 2 to 1, Selene said. Yes, Vaelor agreed. They stood in silence, watching the enemy position themselves, watching war machines roll into place, watching the Purge Coalition prepare to destroy everything Nightspire represented. Then Vaelor spoke again. His words carried the weight of someone who'd spent 5 days thinking about mortality and meaning. I've been calculating odds my entire life. Force strength, tactical advantages, supply lines, all the mathematics of survival. And you know what I've learned? What? Selene asked. Numbers don't account for will, Vaelor said. For wolves who'd rather die standing than live kneeling. For the fact that sometimes one person with absolute certainty is worth 1,000 with doubt. He looked at her. His eyes were gray and fierce and completely unguarded. We're going to win this. Not because we're stronger, because we're right. And being right changes everything. Selene felt something shift in her chest. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, not the conqueror, not the tyrant. The wolf who understood that real power came from conviction rather than cruelty. Then let's show them what right looks like, she said. They descended from the tower together. The War Council assembled in the Great Hall, 3,000 wolves packed into a space designed for ceremony. Veterans and civilians, soldiers and healers, every wolf who'd chosen to stand with Nightspire knowing the cost might be their lives. Vaelor stood at the center. No throne, no elevation, just a king standing among his people. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner without shouting. 5 years ago, I took this throne through violence. Killed my father, crushed opposition, built an empire on the principle that strength meant dominance and fear meant control. I was 16 and terrified and convinced that showing weakness meant death. He paused. Let the silence stretch. I was wrong. The admission rippled through the crowd. Wolves who'd followed him for years, who'd internalized his philosophy, who'd believed that ruthlessness was survival. Not wrong about strength, Vaelor continued. Wrong about what strength means. I thought it meant never bending, never compromising, never admitting vulnerability. But that's not strength. That's brittleness. And brittle things shatter under pressure. He gestured at Selene. She stood beside him, felt every eye in the hall turn toward her. This woman taught me that real strength is flexibility, the ability to change when change is necessary, to admit mistakes, to build something new instead of defending something broken just because it's familiar. The Purge Coalition is coming here to preserve the old ways, Vaelor said, to maintain hierarchies built on oppression, to eliminate anyone who threatens their comfortable cruelty. They think they're protecting tradition, they're protecting cowardice. His voice hardened, became the Alpha King again. We're going to show them what happens when cowards face wolves who've decided fear is no longer acceptable. When the powerless discover they were never powerless at all. When an empire stops asking permission to exist and starts demanding recognition. He raised his hand. Moonfire kindled in his palm. Not his power, Selene's. She taught him to channel it through their bond, a gift that symbolized everything they'd built together. Today we fight not for conquest but survival, not for glory but justice. And when this is over, when the Purge Coalition is broken and scattered, we're going to rebuild this empire into something unprecedented. An empire where strength protects instead of dominates, where power serves instead of rules, where being different isn't a death sentence. He looked across the assembled wolves. Are you with me? The roar that answered shook stone foundations. Oh. The battle began at noon. The Purge Coalition attacked in waves, coordinated, professional. They'd learned from Sarakar's defeat, learned that overwhelming force applied strategically could break even the strongest defense. They were right. Nightspire's outer walls fell within the first hour. The enemy poured through breaches like floodwater. Defenders fought street by street, house by house. The mathematics of attrition played out in blood and screaming. Selene fought at the front lines beside Vaelor. Her wolf blazed crystalline white. Moonfire poured from her in controlled bursts. She'd spent 5 days training, learning to channel power without destroying herself, learning to be surgical instead of apocalyptic. But surgical had limits when facing thousands. She incinerated a squad trying to flank the eastern barricade, felt her reserves drain, shifted back to human behind cover while power regenerated. Vaelor's wolf appeared beside her, midnight fur matted with blood that wasn't his. He'd been fighting for 3 hours straight, protecting her while she recovered, killing anything that got close. They were holding, barely. Kael appeared through smoke and chaos. His armor was shattered, blood poured from a gash across his face, but his eyes were still sharp. "Western Quarter is collapsing," he shouted over the sound of combat. "We need reinforcements or we lose that entire section." "We don't have reinforcements," Vaelor said. He'd shifted to human, looked exhausted. "Everyone's already committed." "Then we lose the Western Quarter," Kael said flatly. "No," Selene said. She forced herself to stand. "Power still recovering, but not empty." "I can hold it. You'll burn through everything you have," Vaelor said. "Then what?" "Then I trust you to protect me while I recover," Selene said. "Like you've been doing all day." Their eyes met. The bond between them flared. She could feel his fear, his desperation, his absolute refusal to let her sacrifice herself. But she could also feel his pride. "Go," Vaelor said quietly. "I'll cover the eastern approach." Selene ran. Through burning streets, past wounded defenders, past citizens huddled in basements praying to survive what empires did to each other. She reached the Western Quarter as enemy wolves poured through a collapsed barricade. She didn't hesitate. Moonfire exploded outward in a wave. Not the surgical strikes she'd been using, pure concentrated destruction. Enemy wolves disintegrated on contact, the barricade sealed behind walls of white flame that burned without consuming. A barrier that would hold as long as her power lasted, which wouldn't be long. Selene collapsed behind the flame wall. Her body shook, vision blurred. She'd pushed too hard, used too much. The exhaustion wasn't just physical, it was existential, like she'd burned parts of her soul to fuel the defense. A defender appeared. Young, maybe 19, his eyes were wide with shock and awe. "You saved us," he said. Selene tried to respond. Couldn't. The world was tilting sideways. Then Isolde was there. Her grandmother appeared from nowhere with medical supplies and fierce determination. She forced liquid down Selene's throat. Bitter. Medicinal. It burned like fire and tasted like survival. "You're not dying today," Isolde said. Her voice carried absolute certainty. "Your mother didn't sacrifice everything so you could burn yourself out in the first real battle." The medicine hit Selene's system. Power flooded back. Not completely, but enough. She forced herself upright. "How long have I been down?" she asked. 7 minutes, Isolde said. "The barrier is holding, but you need to let it go before it drains you completely." "I can't," Selene said. "If it falls, they'll overrun the quarter." "Then make a choice," Isolde said. Her voice was harsh, uncompromising. "Die maintaining a barrier or live to win the war. Your mother chose death. Don't repeat her mistake." The words were brutal, necessary, true. Selene let the barrier fall. Enemy wolves poured through immediately, but this time defenders were ready. They'd used the 7 minutes to reposition, to set traps, to prepare for close combat. The Western Quarter became a bloodbath, but it held. Selene fought beside wolves she'd never met, beside civilians who'd picked up weapons for the first time, beside elderly fighters who remembered when empires were smaller and crueler. They fought not with hope of victory, but with refusal to surrender. Sometimes refusal was enough. The sun set on a city still standing, barely, bloodied, but not broken. The Purge Coalition pulled back to regroup. They'd expected to overwhelm Nightspire in hours. Instead, they'd spent a full day bleeding against defenses that shouldn't have held. Morale was a weapon sharper than steel, and Nightspire's morale was forged from pure spite. That night the defenders gathered in what remained of the Great Hall. Half the roof was gone. Snow fell through gaps onto wolves too exhausted to care. Casualty reports came in. 800 dead, another 1,000 wounded. The numbers were devastating, but they'd survived the first day. That was more than anyone expected. Vaelor stood at the center looking like death personified, covered in blood and soot and the accumulated weight of watching wolves die for his choices. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. We held. Against impossible odds and overwhelming force, we held. That tells me something. It tells me we're not defending an empire anymore. We're defending an idea. And ideas don't die from combat. They die from surrender. He looked across the assembled survivors. Tomorrow, they'll come again. Harder. Angrier. They'll throw everything at us because tonight they're afraid. Afraid that maybe we're not the monsters they claimed. That maybe their entire justification for this purge was a lie they told themselves to feel righteous about murder. Let them be afraid, Vaelor said. Fear is what happens when certainty cracks. And their certainty is shattering against our refusal to accept their worldview. Selene watched him transform the narrative. Watched a conqueror become a leader. Watched violence evolve into vision. This was the man who'd killed his father, who'd built an empire on terror, who'd spent 14 years believing cruelty was the only language power understood, and he was using that power to protect instead of dominate. The irony was beautiful and terrible. After the briefing, they found a quiet corner away from the crowd, just the two of them, sitting on broken stone while snow fell through gaps in the ceiling. Vaelor's hand found hers. His fingers were rough, scarred, shaking slightly from exhaustion or emotion or both. If we lose tomorrow, he said quietly, I need you to know something. We're not going to lose, Selene said. If we do, Vaelor continued. His voice was firm. I need you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me remember what I was fighting for, made me understand that power without purpose is just violence with better publicity. He looked at her. His eyes were gray and exhausted and absolutely certain. I love you. Not because fate decided it, because you challenged every comfortable lie I told myself about leadership, because you refused to let me hide behind brutality disguised as necessity. Selene felt tears sliding down her face. I love you too, even when you're impossible, especially then. They kissed. The bond between them flared. For a moment, the exhaustion and fear faded. There was only them, only this connection that had survived betrayal and siege and the slow grinding pressure of building something new from broken pieces. When they broke apart, Vaelor rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow we end this, he said, one way or another. Together, Selene agreed. They held each other while snow fell and the empire held its breath. The second day began with the Purge Coalition's final assault. They came with everything. All 6,000 remaining wolves, war machines, siege engines, magic stolen from corrupted sources. They hit Nightspire's defenses like an avalanche designed to bury hope. The outer districts fell within hours. By noon, the enemy reached the central citadel where the last defenders had gathered. 3,000 wolves had become 1,500, wounded, exhausted, running on spite and stubbornness. Selene and Vaelor stood at the top of the citadel steps. Below them stretched the final defensive line. Behind them huddled civilians who'd nowhere else to run. This was it, the last stand. The moment that would define whether Nightspire's experiment in compassionate power survived or died beneath the weight of tradition. Vaelor drew his sword. Selene let moonfire kindle in her palms. They looked at each other. No words needed. The bond said everything. Then something impossible happened. Horns sounded from the south. Not Purge Coalition signals. Something else. Familiar but unexpected. The remaining territories loyal to Vaelor had arrived. 5,000 wolves poured onto the battlefield, led by alphas who'd been neutral, who'd watched the Purge Coalition's brutality and made a choice, made a stand. The tide turned. Not immediately, not easily. The battle raged for hours, street by street, building by building. Selene burned through her reserves 3 times. Vaelor fought like he was trying to kill death itself. Kale carved through enemies with mechanical precision. But slowly, inevitably, the Purge Coalition broke. Not from overwhelming force, from realization. From the moment enough wolves looked around and understood they were killing for wolves who'd lied to them, who'd used their fear and tradition to justify atrocity. The surrender started with individuals, then squads, then entire battalions laying down weapons and refusing to continue. By sunset, the Purge Coalition had ceased to exist. Not because they'd been exterminated, because they'd been shown a different way, because enough wolves chose conscience over obedience. Selene stood in the ruins of Nightspire's main square, watching enemy commanders kneel before Vaelor. Watched the Alpha King accept their surrender with terms that emphasized restoration over revenge. Watched him choose mercy when violence would have been easier. This was the empire they'd been building. Not perfect, not without cost, but fundamentally different from what had come before. Later, when the bodies had been cleared and the wounded tended, and the city began the slow process of rebuilding, Selene found Vaelor alone in the throne room. He stood before the obsidian throne, looking at it like he'd never seen it before. She approached quietly, stood beside him. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I've spent 14 years sitting on that thing," Vaelor said. "Making decisions, enforcing laws, building an empire. And I'm not sure I ever understood what it represented until now." "What does it represent?" Selene asked. "Responsibility," Vaelor said. "Not power, not authority. The burden of making choices that affect thousands of lives. Of carrying the weight when those choices go wrong. Of staying standing when everything inside you wants to collapse." He turned to look at her. "I don't want to do this alone anymore. I don't want to be the solitary king on the throne making pronouncements. I want partnership. Shared burden. Someone to tell me when I'm wrong before I make catastrophic mistakes." He knelt. Actually knelt. The Alpha King, who never bowed to anyone, dropped to one knee before her. "Rule with me," he said. "Not beneath me. Beside me. As equal. As partner. As the queen this empire deserves." Selene felt her heart crack open. This was the man who'd conquered nations, offering to share the throne he'd killed for. Offering vulnerability when armor would have been safer. "Yes," she said. Her voice broke on the word. "Yes." Vaelor stood, pulled her into a kiss that tasted like smoke and blood and promises made in fire. When they broke apart, he removed the ceremonial crown from the throne, the obsidian circlet that represented absolute authority. He broke it, actually shattered it against stone. "Let the pieces scatter. We're building something new," he said. "New symbols, new traditions, new definitions of what power means." He took her hand. "Starting now." The coronation happened 3 months later. Nightspire had rebuilt, not to its former glory, to something different. Streets were wider, districts integrated. The rigid hierarchies that had defined pack structure for centuries were being slowly dismantled and replaced with systems that valued contribution over birthright. It was messy, imperfect, constantly evolving, but it was alive in ways the old empire had never been. Selene stood in the great hall wearing a dress the color of moonlight. Her grandmother had woven it with threads that captured starlight, made her look like she'd stepped out of myth. Beside her stood Vaelor. He wore ceremonial armor redesigned to symbolize protection rather than conquest. His crown was forged from melted weapons, a reminder that power could be transformed. Kael officiated, his voice carried across the assembled crowd. Wolves from every territory, citizens and nobles, commoners and warriors, everyone who'd chosen to be part of what they were building. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate ritual, no ancient traditions that reinforced hierarchy. Just two wolves promising to lead together, to share burden, to build an empire where strength protected rather than dominated. When Kael asked if they accepted the responsibility of leadership, Vaelor answered first. "I do." With humility and recognition that power is a tool that can build or destroy. "I choose to build." Then Selene spoke, her voice carried to every corner. "I do." With understanding that leadership means service, that the powerless deserve protection, that being right matters more than being comfortable. Kael placed matching crowns on their heads, forged silver, simple, beautiful. Then Vaelor did something unprecedented. He turned to the crowd and spoke words no Alpha King had ever said. "We rule by your consent, not by divine right or inherited authority. If we fail you, remove us. If we become what we fought against, replace us. An empire that can't question its leaders deserves to fall." The crowd erupted in shock, in awe, in recognition that something fundamental had shifted. Selene took Vaelor's hand, faced the empire together, not as conqueror and weapon, as partners who'd survived impossible odds and chosen to use that survival to build something worth protecting. Years later, when historians wrote about the transformation of Nightspire, they struggled to capture what had changed. The laws looked similar on paper. The structures remained recognizable. But something essential had shifted, something that couldn't be measured in policy or recorded in documents. Selene understood what they missed. It wasn't about laws. It was about philosophy, about the fundamental belief that power existed to protect rather than control, that strength meant flexibility rather than rigidity, that leadership demanded constant evolution rather than comfortable stagnation. She stood in the library Vaelor had built for her. Thousands of volumes, everything ever written about starborn bloodlines, about ancient magic, about the histories that had been suppressed because knowledge was dangerous to those who ruled through ignorance. Vaelor appeared in the doorway. He moved slower than he used to. The wounds from that final battle had left permanent damage, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating 3 moves ahead. He watched her reading, smiled. "Found anything useful?" he asked. "Always," Selene said. "This one is about lunar cycles and their effect on power manifestation. Turns out our ancestors understood things we've forgotten." "We'll remember them again," Vaelor said. "That's what this is about. Reclaiming what was buried, building on what was lost." He moved to stand beside her, looked out the window at the city below. It had grown, prospered, become something neither of them could have imagined when they first met. "Do you ever regret it?" Selene asked quietly. "Giving up absolute power, sharing the throne, choosing partnership over dominance." Vaelor was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke with absolute certainty. "Every single day, and I wouldn't change a thing." He took her hand. His fingers were scarred and familiar and steady. "Power was easier when it was just mine, when I didn't have to justify decisions or consider other perspectives, when fear kept everyone in line. But easier isn't better. And what we've built," he gestured at the city, "at the empire beyond, this is better, harder, more fragile, constantly requiring effort, but real in ways the old empire never was." Selene leaned against him, felt his warmth, his solidity. The bond between them had deepened over years, become something unshakable. "We did good work," she said. "We did necessary work," Vaelor corrected. "Good is what comes after, what the next generation builds on our foundation." They stood together watching the sun set over an empire that had learned the hardest lesson of all, that real strength wasn't found in dominance or fear or the ability to crush opposition. Real strength was found in the courage to change, to admit mistakes, to build something new even when the old ways were comfortable. Selene Vaeris had been buried alive for 24 years, called broken, dismissed, humiliated. Now she was a queen who'd taught an empire that being different wasn't weakness, that survival meant evolution, that the wolves everyone underestimated were often the ones who changed the world. And Vaelor Draven had been a conqueror who believed cruelty was strength, who'd built an empire on fear and held it through violence. Now he was a king who understood that real power came from protection, from partnership, from the willingness to share burden rather than hoard authority. Together they'd survived betrayal and siege and the slow grinding work of transformation. Together they'd proven that love and power weren't opposites, that conscience and strength could coexist, that empires could be forged through something other than terror. The work would never be finished. Each generation would face new challenges, new wolves who wanted to return to the old ways, new threats that required constant vigilance. But that was the point. Nothing worth building was ever complete. The moment you stopped evolving was the moment you started dying. Nightspire would endure, not as an empire of fear, but as an empire that understood the most dangerous thing any ruler could do was believe their power made them infallible. And as the sun set over the citadel, 2 wolves who'd been broken and forged and transformed stood together. Not perfect, not invincible, but absolutely certain that what they'd built was worth every sacrifice, every wound, every impossible choice, because in the end, power proved nothing. How you wielded it proved everything. And they had wielded it to protect, to build, to create space for wolves who'd been dismissed to discover they were extraordinary. That was the legacy they'd leave. Not conquest, but transformation. Not fear, but hope. And somewhere in the city below, a young wolf who'd been told she was worthless looked up at the citadel and saw 2 rulers who'd once been dismissed, who'd survived, who'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous wolves were the ones everyone underestimated. She saw possibility. And possibility, properly nurtured, could reshape empires. The story of Selene Vaeris wasn't about finding power. It was about learning what to do with it once you had it. About choosing conscience over comfort. About building something that would outlast both of them. An empire forged through passion, judgment, and the dangerous courage to love without surrendering strength. Thus Nightspire endured. Not perfect, but real. And real was always harder than myth, but infinitely more valuable.